The King's Avatar audiobook by Kevin Chapter 381 Remote Control. They have the numbers advantage though. What do I do if they split up and continue to move forward? Tang Ru asked. This is just a way of getting more time. Once you get rid of the cleric, you'll be good to go. No, Ye Xiu said. Got it. Tang Ru suddenly understood. During this time, her hands never stopped. The cleric was practically tumbling non-stop. Even if he succeeded in using a quick recover, Tang Ru's soft mist could still catch up in time to send him flying again. All of the attacks she used were able to push him quite a bit of distance away in a circle around the small island. It looked as if he were only a few steps away from jumping into the lake, but he could never find the opportunity to do so. The cleric hoped for his allies to help him, but none of them were able to do so. They were always just a bit too far. Battle mages had a faster movement speed than the other four classes after being buffed by neutral chasers. She was running while attacking him, but her movement speed didn't slow down. The cleric immediately understood that her playing style was quite quick, being able to complete all of these attacks while still moving. You too, cut her off from that side. The knight also realized that if they continued chasing like this, they wouldn't be able to catch her. It was fortunate enough that this was a small island, though. If not for that, the other side would have simply been able to continue pushing the cleric forward. The others knew of their cleric's skill level and they knew that he wasn't weak. But right now, he was being kicked around like a football and was unable to do anything to resist. The others already had a good idea about Soft Mist's skill level. If they didn't have their numbers advantage, they would have turned tail and ran by now. Persist for a bit more, the knight shouted. Hurry up. How could the cleric not be worried? Tang Ru was constantly turning her camera to observe the field. She saw that the other side had split up into two groups of 2 players each. The 2 groups were running in opposite directions and were obviously planning on cutting her off. Tang Ru was currently thinking of what to do when Ye Xiu said, "Don't be in a hurry, wait for my command." "Okay," Tang Ru replied. She honestly didn't know what to do in order to break out of this predicament. After pushing the cleric around another 3 times, Ye Xiu suddenly said, "Turn left for the next attack." Before he finished speaking, Soft Mist had already rushed in front of the cleric. When Tang Ru heard Ye Xiu's words, she hastily changed her push forward to a push to the left. The cleric immediately tumbled to the left and Soft Mist continued to chase after him. Falling Flower palm him once. Ye Xiu followed. Tang Ru heard the order and used a Falling Flower palm. The direction that she had chosen had been accurately grasped. Too far, and the cleric would have enough time to get up by the time she closed in on him. Too close, and her cooldowns might not be up in time. As a result, every one of her palms had been done with just enough power, just so that the cleric had no way of getting up. Her grasp on this technique might not be very good yet, but she at least wasn't blindly letting loose. Her moves were starting to become more and more flexible. Sky strike, jump, circle, swing. Tang Ru didn't bother thinking too much about Ye Xiu's orders. She simply did as she was told. The cleric was hit by the circle swing and was smashed onto the top of the cave. Jump, dragon tooth, go around. Tang Ru was having a very comfortable time with Ye Xiu's commands. The 4 players who had just barely been about to pincer her were now heading in the same direction. Stop for a bit and give him a good beating. This time the cleric didn't get pushed away immediately. Instead, he received a violent beating. Good. Continue pushing now and head towards the water, Ye Xiu called. The battle spear thrust forward and the cleric was driven to the edge of the water. He had healing skills, but he didn't have the chance to use them. As a cleric, being forced to use potions to heal was the same as if he had lost his identity. In addition, his health potion was currently on cooldown. From the damage he had taken, the cleric knew that he didn't have enough time to wait to down another potion. He would either die or be saved by his friends. In any case, anything he did was for nothing, so the cleric could only message, "Hurry, I'm going to die soon. She's so cunning, we were so close to trapping her just before." The other four were trying their hardest to catch up. Hurry, 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 I'm about to die. The cleric was extremely agitated. In the time it took for these few messages to be exchanged, the cleric had already been pushed into the edge of the water. Hurry up and kill him. If your hands are fast enough, it'll be no problem for you, Ye Xiu said. These sorts of words were very effective for Tang Ru. No matter what, she didn't want Ye Xiu to say that her hand speed wasn't fast enough. She knew very well that her greatest strength right now was her hand speed. If she was looked down upon even in this area, then she'd truly feel too ashamed. Pa 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 pa. The sounds of repeated keyboard taps and mouse clicks mixed together. Basic attacks and skills chained together onto the cleric. The cleric hadn't thought that his opponent could attack even faster. He had originally held great confidence that he would be rescued in time. But as his health quickly dropped, his hopes gradually died out as well. He saw his four friends getting closer and closer, but it seemed like he wouldn't be able to hold on until they arrived. Hang on. The elementalist was a long-range attacker. As soon as he was in attack range, he immediately cast a spell. Tang Ru's camera quickly glanced at the elementalist and saw that he was chanting. Ye Xiu's voice could already be heard. He's using Ice Wall. Go forward 2 units. Tang Ru hastily attacked and moved forward. Right as she completed Ye Xiu's orders, she heard a crack as 3 ice walls stood erect in a triangle formation. If she hadn't gone forward 2 units, she would have been trapped by the ice wall. For the elementalist to instantly put up an ice wall accurately was quite impressive. DM in it, just barely, the elementalist shouted in a depressed tone. Stop talking. The other 3 were just as depressed. In truth, if the elementalist hadn't yelled out a hang on, Tang Ru wouldn't have turned her camera to look at them. And if she hadn't seen them, Ye Xiu wouldn't have known that the elementalist was going to cast an ice wall. Tang Ru was feeling quite guilty, too. She knew that if it weren't for Ye Xiu, there would have been no way that she would have been able to make that sort of split-second decision. She would have most likely been trapped by the ice wall. With her fast hand speed, she would have been able to get out of the ice wall very quickly, but she needed all the time she could get to kill off the cleric. That small amount of delay could have been enough to turn the whole situation around. So dangerous, Tang Ru celebrated, but her hands didn't stop moving. The sounds of repeated tapping and clicking continued to sound out. The cleric saw that even his friends could not do anything to stop the opponent. In the end, his last shred of hope disappeared. While the elementalist was chanting another spell, he saw soft mist suddenly leave. She took her spear and made one last strike on the cleric. The cleric's body finally fell over. The cleric's name on the team list had faded away. He was now dead. However, because he hadn't chosen to revive back at the city yet, he was still with the team. Into the water, Ye Xiu gave Tang Ru a new command. Ah! Tang Ru was startled. Wouldn't going into the water expose her weakness? Could he be wanting her to practice fighting in the water? Tang Ru was unsure, but had her soft mist go into the water. The 4 players chased closely after her as she was already in their attack range. Go down, turn around, swim back, flip over. Ye Xiu continued to give orders. Tang Ru finally realized that with this prompting, there was nothing she needed to worry about. It was kind of boring to play, though. Don't play so mechanically. Be more attentive and find your tempo. Ye Xiu saw Tang Ru controlling her soft mist as she was commanded to do. Dragon Tooth. Dragon Tooth, right now, Tang Ru questioned, but still did as she was told. She had originally thought that using the Dragon Tooth was completely wrong, but it turned out that it accurately hit one of the ghost blades. Tang Ru followed up with an attack, but when she used Sky Strike, she missed because of the water. Whether you hit or miss, pay attention to them, Ye Xiu said. Okay, I understand. Tang Ru understood what Ye Xiu was saying. Afterwards, she didn't stop following Ye Xiu's orders. Her line of sight was no longer on the enemies. That capability had been completely given to Ye Xiu. With Ye Xiu observing the opponents and giving her directions, she focused on observing the timing for her strikes and their effectiveness. FCK me, what's going on? The four players weren't stupid. After exchanging a few blows, they felt that something was off. This sister didn't seem like she was clueless about water battles. It could be said that she was an expert. If they kept on fighting her, the four players wouldn't stand a chance. None of them had much skill in water battles. They just had the numbers advantage and wanted to go down to bully someone. How could they know that their opponent was actually extremely good in the water? FCK, too crafty. The four felt like they had fallen into a trap. They didn't dare fight in the water anymore. They only wanted to get back up onto shore now. Tang Ru was listening to Ye Xiu's orders, so she was slower. Completely trapping the four of them wasn't very likely. However, she had still been able to successfully catch two of them. Underwater, these four players were pretty much dead weight. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 382 Chapter 382. One battle after another, Ye Xiu's orders continued to be carried out. Even though there were lots of problems with this method, it was more than enough when facing against these two opponents. The two players who were caught by Tang Ru were the Knight and Elementalist. Right now, they had no means of resisting. Their only thoughts were to get onto land. However, it seemed as if the water was doing damage to them. Every time they swam a stroke, their health went down a chunk. The two obviously knew that all this was due to Soft Mist's attacks, but what could they do? In the water, they already had a deep scar in their hearts. Seeing Soft Mist move so agilely in the water, their hearts wanted to sink into the depths. How could they have any thoughts about fighting back? The only thing the Knight could do was swing his shield around randomly, hoping that he could block a few of the attacks. However, under Ye Xiu's experienced eyes, trying to win through sheer luck was just a dream. Soft Mist's attacks avoided his random shield swings and continued to directly strike him. It's no good. The two had already drunk their best potions. There was nothing they could do about their potion cooldowns, and their cleric had died. What hope could they have? What about those two? The Knight's health finally dropped down to 0, and his character floated in suspension. He knew that the Elementalist would definitely die with him, but it seemed like the two Ghost Blades had successfully escaped. His dead spirit's viewpoint slowly floated higher. The Knight saw that the two Ghost Blades had climbed back up onto the island and were currently standing on the shore side, looking helplessly towards the water. "What are you doing? Run!" The Knight quickly revived and messaged the two of them. The Elementalist was going to die. With only the two of them remaining, whether it was on land or in the water, they still weren't going to be Soft Mist's opponents. They should be using this time to run, not stalling around, waiting to die. The Knight only regretted that they didn't immediately run. Otherwise, they might have had to sacrifice one player, but two fewer players still would have died. "I underestimated the opponent too much," the Knight cried. After reviving in the city and telling the two to hurry up and run, he left the game and went into the QQ group chat to give a report. When he went into the group chat, his comrade cleric was already wailing remorsefully inside. Their guild leader hadn't said a word the entire time. The Knight wasn't sure about the current situation so he sent an emoticon of a crying face. "You also died?" the cleric asked after seeing it. The Knight typed out a "yeah" and then saw the Elementalist's name pop up too. He didn't cry. Instead, he sent an angry face. "I died too." The group chat suddenly fell into silence. No one said anything. And at the same time, Suma Cheng was going along a route based off of her initial observations. She didn't find her original target, but she happened to bump into someone else. The guys from the guilds knew that they all had to flee. Every one of them had hidden their guild names. But what did that do? All of these characters were on the 10th server's level standings. Even if they died another 10 times, their names would still be there. Suma Cheng saw him and wanted to confirm. She opened up the level standings and checked the player's name. After 5 seconds, she confirmed who it was and saw that he was from royal style. Suma Cheng had encountered a combined total of 2 guilds. The previous 2 players that she had killed were both from Herb Garden. After fleeing far away, this royal-style player was praising himself for his outstanding luck. However, if he had just gone straight instead of going on this random path, he wouldn't have bumped into Suma Cheng. His luck really was outstanding. Suma Cheng aerial fired her way over. The waves split apart, causing this lucky talent to turn his viewpoint to look over to see cleansing mist behind him. He had originally thought that he had escaped from danger, but his mood immediately turned from heaven to hell. Smashing his face to the ground wasn't enough to vent all his emotions. Fight back. He didn't have any thoughts of doing that. This player also thought about playing dive deep down to see if he could hide. But as soon as his head entered the water, a cannon shot lifted up the waves, carrying him into the sky. The scene appeared that much more eye-catching on the calm surface of the lake. He never went under the water ever again. He became like a skipping stone, bouncing around on top of the water. When everything turned still again, his health had dropped to 0. I caught one. It doesn't look like there will be anyone else. Suma Cheng messaged, while looking around to see if luck would give her another one. If I had known this would happen, I would have gone with you. Ye Xiu hadn't found anyone at his dungeon entrance. He had already given up and was now wandering around randomly to see if he could bump into someone. I killed 4 of them. I'm currently heading towards where the 5th one is going. I might be able to catch up. Tang Ru also said. Ye Xiu obviously knew about her situation. Her report was just for the others on the team to know. Which direction? Do you need me to help block him? Suma Cheng asked. No need, I might bump into him. Ye Xiu was now heading towards that ghost blade's direction. The 2 ghost blades had split apart. Tang Ru could only catch one of them. She had chased one, the same one as Suma Cheng. As for the other one, she had remembered which direction he had gone off to. After finishing off her target, she could try and chase towards that direction. Ye Xiu saw this, and since he wasn't doing anything, naturally went over to intercept him. At this moment, 3 of them were busy. Only 1,000 Creations and Horseshooter were sitting on their island, silently going around in circles. Ye Xiu hadn't forgotten about these 2. He messaged, I don't think anyone is dungeoning anymore. 1,000 Creations, Horseshooter, you 2 can leave. Go to Sin City. If you meet any other guilds, do what you want. Sin City, the 2 questioned, but immediately understood. Of course, Sin City. Ye Xiu chuckled. Sin City might be of a lower level than Thousand Waves Lake, but the experience from Sin City's dungeon was still much better than killing wild monsters at Thousand Waves Lake. This was why, no matter the level, players always ran 2 dungeons. One was suitable for their level, while the other was a grade lower. Some even ran 3 dungeons. After all, aside from the experience in dungeons, better items would be dropping too. If you're going to Sin City, then hurry. You might be able to directly intercept them, Suma Cheng said. Yeah, everyone head towards the shore, but if you run into someone on the way, don't miss an opportunity to kill him. It's just these players anyways, Ye Xiu said. The 5 players were all in different locations, so they all headed towards the shore in different directions. Thousand Waves Lake was so vast. With less than 100 players there, finding someone by chance was very difficult. The 5 continued to scout as they swam, but didn't find anyone else when they reached the shore. On the shore, they scouted around once again but didn't find anything. As a result, they headed straight for Sin City. Sin City wasn't as empty as Thousand Waves Lake. In normal circumstances, this was where the highest-leveled players would be at. There were numerous players in a server, so there would naturally be many at the same level stage. Right now, Sin City was packed with players. There are so many players here, how troublesome. The 5 were outside of the entrance to a prison, Sin City's dungeon. When they looked, there were quite a few dungeon teams, and quite a few of them were from enemy guilds. Seeing them, Thousand Creations immediately called. Ah, so many guild players, we're going to be found out. thousand creations who loved to kill steel monsters was the most sensitive to being found. Stay calm, Ye Xiu said. Even if we're found, don't worry. Can we still kill them? Thousand creations said. Even if we can't, we can at least let them know, Ye Xiu said. At this moment, there really were quite a few players who noticed Lord Grimm's group, and they immediately reported it to their guilds. These players had only received orders to pay attention to Lord Grimm's movements. The higher-ups didn't say what to do if they found them. After all, getting pressured by Ye Xiu's group wasn't anything glamorous. The guilds backed by clubs cared about their appearances, so they hid some things from their members. The players from the new servers weren't as loyal, though. The top guilds pretty much received notifications that Lord Grimm's group was at Sin City's dungeon entrance. None of their reactions were alike. FCK me. What do these guys plan on doing? What are they planning? Misty Lock was quite sad and angry. They had suffered greatly at Thousand Waves Lake and chose to retreat. Retreating didn't mean that they were just going to stand there and do nothing. They went to the lower grade leveling area and ran over to run Sin City's dungeon. It had only been peaceful for a short while when suddenly the other side unexpectedly started chasing after them. It was too unlucky. Did you guys offend Ye Xiu somehow? Misty Lock talked to Hazy Mist. He was already at this step. No, we didn't, Hazy Mist said. When they had come into contact with each other, he hadn't known that Lord Grimm was Ye Xiu. He was a bit angry when they were haggling over dungeon guides, but Hazy Mist didn't think that he went as far as to offend Ye Xiu. Then why does he keep on focusing on us? Misty Lock said. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Hazy Mist said. How could it be so coincidental? Misty Lock didn't believe it. He felt like he was right. What now? Hazy Mist asked. After this information came, the 5 brothers in the dungeon were notified as well. Reports said that they had narrowly missed getting wiped out in the dungeon because of nervousness. After clearing away a mob, the 5 stopped their advancement and went into the group chat to talk about what to do. Hazy Mist didn't want to say that they had no ideas in front of everyone, so he opened up a private window with his guild leader. Tell the dungeon teams in Sin City to not go into the dungeon. I'm going to contact the other guilds. As the manager of a guild backed by a club, he wasn't an idiot. Misty Lock was finally going to make a move. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 383 Chapter 383. Take advantage of the opportunity outside of the Sin City dungeon. More and more players began to gather together. There were always lots of players outside the dungeon, so no one noticed the change. The extra characters just stood there in front of an entrance. Their viewpoints were pointed towards the dungeon entrance, as if they were going to go in at any time. However, those who paid attention to them would discover that these characters had already been standing there for at least 20 minutes without going in. Time continued to pass. Players without a team, who were busy organizing wild parties, began noticing these strange fellows. They seemed to be in a party, and no one was sure if they had enough players. Others sent them requests, but they didn't seem to even look at them and just left them. All of their energy seemed to be focused on that dungeon entrance. Among this crowd, players gradually began to notice a few characters. These characters were on the 10th server level standings, so quite a few players recognized them. Quite a few of them were here. High-level characters still needed to train. Sin City was a suitable dungeon for them, so that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that these players were all pushed into this one dungeon entrance. In addition, they were the same as those extras. They just stood there, staring without any response. A few curious players had already begun paying attention to these characters. They moved. The curious players suddenly discovered that these characters suddenly moved. Their feet shuffled forward a tiny bit as if they were ready to rush forward at any minute. Their hands were raised up a bit as if they were going to attack at any time. Their viewpoints all focused towards a certain direction. The curious players also moved their viewpoints in that direction and saw an even more famous Lord Grimm. Even though Lord Grimm wasn't the player with the highest level in the 10th server, he was most definitely the most famous player there, and was undoubtedly the strongest as well. Were these players waiting for Lord Grimm? The curious players were wondering this. Then, they saw that Lord Grimm had a few characters beside him. They weren't able to see their names when their characters disappeared. If a character disappeared in front of a dungeon entrance, then they obviously went into the dungeon. Outside of the dungeon entrance, the strange fellows turned into statues again. The faces of the leaders of these strange fellows, the overall guild leaders of the 7 top guilds, turned ugly. He's clearly playing with us. Herb Garden's Arasima gave his opinion. Misty Castle's guild leader, Misty Locke, had the ugliest expression on his face. Their guild had suffered the most losses tonight. He had been the one to look for the other guilds and set up this operation. He had thought that they would be able to cause a ruckus, but all that ended up happening was them being forced to stand outside of the dungeon entrance. His train of thought was very simple. This was because their clubs cared very much about their image. After Lord Grimm created his guild, they had the clear advantage in overall strength. On the surface, they had to follow the rules and could only resort to backhanded methods. And now Lord Grimm's group was attacking back and killing them. They had chased them all the way from Thousand Waves Lake to Sin City. Thousand Waves Lake didn't have any other players. The top guilds could ally together and fight. But in Sin City, they couldn't hide from the public eye. However, if Lord Grimm was the one to take the initiative and attack their players in Sin City, then fighting back was completely reasonable. No one could say that they were in the wrong. Once they knew that Lord Grimm's group had chased them all the way to Sin City, Misty Locke was first filled with grief and anger, and then quickly came up with this plan. He had the ability to gather up the other guilds backed by clubs. Crying wasn't his only skill. Misty Castle wasn't the only guild to notice Lord Grimm's appearance at Sin City. After knowing this, they had also begun discussing a countermeasure. This was especially so for the other 3 guilds that had been attacked at Thousand Waves Lake, Herb Garden, Royal Heritage, and Void Walk. Even though their losses hadn't been as great, they were still very sad and angry. At this moment, Misty Locke contacted them and told them his plan. The other guild leaders heard him and immediately felt that this was a good opportunity as well. If they took advantage of this opportunity well, they might even be able to use this as an excuse to attack Guild Happy and utilize their advantage in overall strength. As a result, the top guilds deployed their troops and sent everyone who was at Sin City's level stage to gather there. Even if they couldn't use this as an excuse to attack Guild Happy, they were determined to use their advantage in numbers to wipe out Lord Grimm's group. But first, they needed Lord Grimm to initiate. The guilds backed by clubs also had their own annoyances. It was like those large sects from wuxia stories. All of their actions had to be proper and reasonable. They couldn't be like those bandits who did whatever they wanted to do. Before this, everyone had been working their hearts out to avoid Lord Grimm killing them. Now, at a different place, they were impatiently waiting for Lord Grimm to hurry up and attack them. But it seemed like Lord Grimm was completely uninterested in these not even level 40 extras. The guild leaders knew that their opponent's goal wasn't here, so they also sent level 40 and up characters to attract his enmity. But then they watched as Lord Grimm's group just entered the Sin City dungeon. The guild leaders, who had been filled with hope, immediately turned cold. Maybe he didn't see us. Someone guessed, no way, how could he not have seen us? Their plan had been executed very on point. The guild leaders had no idea why. They had personally seen the plan through. Their high-level characters stood out in the crowd, showing off their might. How could they have not been seen? Should we wait? Someone suggested. Let's wait. Get ready and wait for them to come out. As a result, the scene in the beginning appeared again. Everyone just stood there staring stupidly out into space. They were all waiting for Lord Grimm's group to come out of the dungeon, and were hoping that Lord Grimm would attack them, so they could use this as an excuse to fight back. The heavens didn't disappoint those who tried. The time had finally come. Some were ready to attack. Some stood in a position that was easy to be attacked. But Lord Grimm didn't even turn his head to look at them and entered the dungeon again. Herb Garden's guild leader, Arasima, had previously been doubtful about whether Lord Grimm had seen them or had chosen to ignore them. This time he was sure that they had been played. In this half hour, not only have our elites not leveled, our second-string teams haven't done anything either, Arasima said. This guy's too crafty, Misty Lock said helplessly. He also understood our thoughts and wasn't tricked by us. He also used this opportunity to waste our time. West Riding Wind said gloomily. Everyone went silent. It was true that normal players may not understand some of the choices that guilds backed by clubs had to make. But how could a pro player like God Ye Xiu not know? He already knew that there was no way that they could attack him at this place. If they did, it would have to be some open accounts. However, at this point, most of their open accounts had been sent to infiltrate the other guilds. The remaining few could deal with a normal player, but they were against two all-star level pros who also had the level advantage. Sending their open accounts to attack was just asking to die. It wasn't as if the top guilds hadn't thought of using their open accounts. It was just that their strength wasn't enough. All of this might have been completely seen through by their opponent, which was why he wasn't afraid. Every step he made, whether he fought or not, caused their top guilds to suffer losses. And him. At Thousand Waves Lake, they were clearing monsters. In Sin City, they were running the dungeon. Even though they weren't completely focused on leveling, it didn't delay them too much. The guild leaders couldn't come to a conclusion. They could only quietly make their own orders. The players outside the dungeon entrance gradually went away. The curious players had thought that there would be something fun to watch and were now stunned. During this time, those players just standing there seemed to have moved for a single instant when Lord Grimm appeared, and now they just left. Had they been waiting there the entire time for Lord Grimm to look at them? Was this some sort of deep love? When Ye Xiu's group came out of their second dungeon run at Sin City, they saw that those bunch of characters had left. They all left. Tang Ru's voice carried a bit of lament. She felt that it was a pity that they hadn't fought. Too bad. Ye Xiu also had the same tone as her. He obviously didn't feel that it was a pity that they didn't fight, but rather that he had wasted only a bit of their time. If the other side had stood there stupidly all night, Ye Xiu would have been much more satisfied. Do we continue? Tang Ru asked. We still have one more. We're all here too, so let's go. We have to use this time well, Ye Xiu said. As a result, the five once again ran the dungeon again. After coming out, it was very late. It wasn't convenient for Suma Cheng to play all night, so she logged off. Horse Shooter had come because of Suma Cheng, so he followed after his idol. When he saw that Suma Cheng had left, his enthusiasm died and he also logged off after saying bye. It's just us three now. There's nothing to do here, so let's go to Thousand Waves Lake, Ye Xiu said. Are we going to keep on causing them trouble? Tang Ru asked. Leveling is our main priority. Causing trouble will only be when it's convenient, Ye Xiu said. Understood, Tang Ru replied. How is it? It's fun, no? Ye Xiu asked Thousand Creations. You probably feel very happy stirring up trouble everywhere, right? Thousand Creations was speechless. Was he really the type of person that liked to cause trouble? But after thinking for a bit, Thousand Creations discovered that he really was that type of person. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 384 Chapter 384. Even sitting idle is scary this night had not gone well for Herb Garden, Howling Heights, Misty Castle, Blossom Valley, Royal Heritage, 301 and Void Walk. Normally, they were the mighty top-tier experts in the game, but tonight it was as if they were in a nightmare. With their levels, after running their dungeons, Thousand Waves Lake was the most suitable place for leveling. These 7 guilds didn't want to agree to Lord Grimm's conditions. They hoped for good luck and played hide and seek. Their plan wasn't that risky either. Thousand Waves Lake was such a large leveling area. There was a very low chance of coincidentally bumping into someone else. After Ye Xiu's group returned to Thousand Waves Lake, they also completed quests and cleared monsters to level. However, they weren't like others, who only went around in a small area. They were wandering around the entire leveling area with the purpose of coincidentally bumping into someone. It was quite unfortunate for the characters that they came across. Ye Xiu always had a method to close in on his opponents unaware. Even when they discovered each other at the same time, with Ye Xiu's skill, he was able to catch up to his target. It didn't happen often. All the way up until the day lit up, this had only happened 3 times. 3 times might not be a lot, but it proved that it was possible that it could happen. They had originally thought that completing quests and killing monsters would be a very relaxed task, but because of this, they had to take precautions. That night, they circled around and around until their minds went dizzy and their hands became sore. There was nothing else that they could do. They had to keep a lookout around them at all times in order to prevent being bumped into. As for Ye Xiu's group, their night passed by like any other. It might have even turned out better. Besides clearing monsters and completing quests, they also held hopes of finding someone else. It was a small plus in the course of their leveling. Being filled with hope was a wonderful feeling. The sun's up. When these words came out, most all-nighters would look exhausted. But today, Thousand Creations didn't seem tired at all. His tone even carried a hint of lament. Tonight, he had actually played with his idol, God Ye Xiu, all night. Thousand Creations could only feel that this was a dream. He nearly pinched his leg to check. "Yup, the sun's up, go rest," Ye Xiu said. "Okay." Thousand Creations was reluctant to part. "God, when are you going to be on again?" I don't have an exact time, whenever I wake up," Ye Xiu said. "Oh, I do that too." Thousand Creations felt excited, knowing that he shared a common habit with his god. "Nice, have a good rest." Ye Xiu said bye to Thousand Creations. Thousand Creations logged out from the game. Tang Ru was still fighting a monster. Apart from killing monsters, completing quests, and hoping, Tang Ru naturally consulted Ye Xiu for help on water battles. Ye Xiu didn't hold back, teaching what he could and helping to devise a training regimen for Tang Ru to use in the water. It couldn't be said that she had made a huge amount of progress, but she was, at least, taking another step towards her goal to be pro. Besides pro players, normal players wouldn't specially study how to fight in the water unless they were really interested. How'd it go? How'd it go? How'd yesterday night go? Chen Gu had already woken up and appeared in the internet cafe. The first thing she did was run over and ask about this. These days, even if she wasn't there, her heart was pretty much set in the 10th server. She wasn't a part of the development of Guild Happy, but she felt happy or sad for it as if she were. Last night, if it wasn't because she didn't have an account to use, she would have pulled an all-nighter too. "Nothing much. We killed a few dozen players." "Yeah," Ye Xiu said. "A few dozen." In Chen Guo's eyes, such a number was frightening. "A few dozen and you're not worried. Do you have a red name?" Chen Guo said. "Of course." Ye Xiu looked at his screen. Lord Grimm's name was bright red. This was very common after Peking. It was quite troublesome to have a red name. Most NPCs would not trade with a red-named character. When a red-named character died, the experience and gold loss would be greater, and the chance for an equipment to drop would be much higher. Ye Xiu and Sima Cheng had peeked the most. Tang Ru had also killed 4 players, but after nothing had happened for a long time, her red name was pretty much gone. Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm was different though. He didn't even know how many he had killed and had no idea when his red name would go away. "You've got to be careful," Chen Gu said. Ignoring all else, Ye Xiu's account had a silver weapon on him. If he died and his silver weapon dropped, that would be extremely bad. Yeah, you be careful, don't get killed by the monsters. Ye Xiu stood up and said, "What are you talking about? I'm going to rest. I'm going to leave my account here, help me watch it." Ye Xiu said. "What, if you're going to sleep, then log off," Chen Guo said. "I can't do that, the other guild's players are still leveling. I have to leave my account there to give them some pressure." Ye Xiu said. Too evil. Tang Ru had killed off her monster and understood what Ye Xiu meant. As long as Lord Grimm's account was online, it meant that Thousand Waves Lake was unsafe and the guild players had to be careful. Even though it wasn't actually a threat because Ye Xiu wasn't controlling it, they would still be looking around them nervously. The pressure from an expert standing there was difficult to bear. Don't. What if they attack? Chen Guo was too afraid to take up such a task. What a joke! Who do you think I am? They wouldn't dare to take the initiative to attack me. Ye Xiu said. How could they not dare? They have the numbers advantage. Even if they had dared to before, after last night they wouldn't anymore. Ye Xiu laughed and then added, just don't go out of the water. Chen Guo sat nervously at Ye Xiu's spot and controlled Lord Grimm a bit clumsily. You don't need to play on him. You can do your own thing. Just don't let the monsters scratch me to death. At other times you can just have him floating. Ye Xiu said. That's too fake, I'll control him. Chen Guo took Lord Grimm and began fighting monsters in the water. She was very unfamiliar with this character, but unspecialized characters had launcher skills too. At the Christmas event, Chen Guo had learned how to change the forms on the Thousand Chance umbrella. After switching to the gun form, it felt pretty much the same. The Thousand Chance umbrella was extremely powerful, so clearing monsters was easy. Chen Guo wasn't a beginner either. Her water fighting skill wasn't good, but the monsters were stupid, so even if she couldn't move or dodge, it wasn't a problem. Chen Guo killed a few monsters and discovered that it was an easy task, so she relaxed and waved her hands to Ye Xiu. Okay, you can go ahead. Should I also have her stay and float? Tang Ru asked. Sure, if you die, you die, it doesn't matter. Chen Guo didn't turn her head. She was focused on controlling Lord Grimm. Ha 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 ha. Ye Xiu laughed as he left. Tang Ru obviously knew that Chen Guo was joking and wouldn't be angry at her. She messed up Chen Guo's hair and then left as well. After a few steps, she looked back and saw that Chen Guo was still focused on controlling Lord Grimm. Her hair was all messed up, but she didn't seem to care. The guild players didn't know about Ye Xiu's little trick. Their characters were leveled on shifts. After playing all night, someone else took their place. Of course, they were told the current situation. The most important order was that if they encountered Lord Grimm, they were to run as far away from him as possible. After hearing about the nightmare that night, the people who took the next shift didn't dare be negligent. The people who went off their shift had looks filled with envy. They felt that Ye Xiu had to rest, so while Lord Grimm was offline, everything would be peaceful. How beautiful was that? All of those experts understood what it meant to be lucky at this moment. The people who took up the next shift continued to play and stay alert. They also thought that it was about time for Lord Grimm to go offline, so they asked about it from time to time. 1 hour still there, 2 hours still there, 3 hours still there. The new players were also constantly rotating their cameras in circles to be on the lookout. Their heads were going dizzy and their hands had turned sore, but Lord Grimm was still there. Has anyone seen where he is? They continued to ask each other. I haven't. If you see him, you're probably already dead, another said. Yeah, not seeing him is a good thing. If you see him, how could he not see you? That's not necessarily true, no. You can go check then. Go look around and maybe you'll find him. Never mind. That morning, even though they didn't bump into Lord Grimm was still the main topic of every guild. The players who had taken up the shift were all waiting impatiently. Even when they changed shifts again, Lord Grimm was still online. After resting, the guild leaders began working again and also froze when they heard this news. After exchanging information, they knew that no one had been attacked, but they couldn't tell if it was because of luck or because of something else. Maybe he's already gone to sleep and his character is just floating there. Could it be a bluff to give us pressure? How despicable. And it's about time that he'll be getting up too. Everyone fell silent. FCK, he really is up. Guild 301 sent a sad face. One of our players just got killed by him. There's nothing that we can do. We can't know whether he's actually playing or just sitting there. Not moving might just be a trap to lure us in. O great gods, help us subdue these devils. The guilds all cried. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 385 Chapter 385. Taking advantage of the situation, they might not have suffered any losses, but they had been in a high-pressure situation. Each of the top guilds held a meeting with their 10th server elites, telling them not to be afraid of the dangers. They were to level stubbornly, bearing the heavy pressure and resist Lord Grimm's terrorist attacks. They were to struggle until the very end. Had experienced exhaustion and nervousness from this type of pressure. They were more focused on the results. They could only say persist, persist, and persist towards the difficulties met during the process. If this wasn't a guild backed by a club, no one would be listening. Gaming was for relaxing and having fun. Who would struggle so hard for a game? But once it involved the clubs, the game was no longer just a game. It was a job and a reason to struggle for. Even though the encouragement from the guild leaders didn't do much, it made clear their attitude towards this. The elites could only follow the orders and brace themselves. At Cafe Happy, Ye Xiu switched with Chen Guo after getting up. That morning, Chen Guo hadn't killed anyone, but she had gained quite a bit of experience for him. As soon as Ye Xiu switched places with her, he immediately began his operation. He killed monsters while looking around and then quickly found a Guild 301 player who was naturally eliminated. Tang Ru had also gotten up around the same time as Ye Xiu. She didn't go directly to the game, though. Instead, she went to change shifts at the front desk. Ye Xiu saw this and was startled. These past few days, he had been too invested in the development of the guild. He kept on feeling that something wasn't right. When he saw Tang Ru take a shift, he suddenly remembered he hadn't taken up a shift ever since the All-Star weekend. Ye Xiu began to sweat madly. He glanced at Chen Guo. There was no way that Chen Guo didn't know that he hadn't worked these past few days, yet she hadn't said anything about it. I say, Ye Xiu opened his mouth to speak. Chen Guo turned her head. Took up the night shift these past few days. Ye Xiu tried to speak vaguely about the topic without getting to the point. You don't need to worry, Chen Guo was much more direct. Then developing the guild and creating the team is your work. Chen Guo made a fist. What? How come you don't seem happy about it? Chen Guo narrowed her eyes at Ye Xiu, who looked like he wanted to say something. Nothing. I just thought that you've made quite the profit. Ye Xiu said. Me? What profit? Chen Guo was puzzled. The pay for being a cafe manager during the night shift is very reasonable. But now you want me to do this for that pay? That's not how much I'm worth, Ye Xiu said. Bullshit, you're taking advantage of me. After knowing Ye Xiu's identity, Chen Guo's tolerance for Ye Xiu had clearly gone up. A lot of things had become nicer to look at. She hadn't gotten angry for quite a while. I couldn't help but mention it, Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo stared blankly for a bit. Her mind churned and she realized that Ye Xiu wasn't wrong. He was an expert at his speciality. As a top-tier god in glory, he only had a normal status as a cafe manager. But if you wanted him to play glory, he was much more valuable and his worth would naturally be very different. Then what do you want? Chen Guo was a bit uneasy. If she had to pay Ye Xiu according to his pro status, then she would have some trouble taking the loss. Nothing. I was just saying, Ye Xiu said. Do you want a pay raise? Chen Guo asked. Ye Xiu currently had the pay for a cafe manager. Even if his pay was 10 times that amount, it wouldn't be enough for his status as a pro god. No need, just food and shelter is enough. Ye Xiu nodded his head. Chen Guo saw Ye Xiu go back to his game. She didn't know what to say. She turned her head and played the game for a bit when she suddenly realized something. He had been the one to start the conversation. From his tone of voice, it seemed like he had felt bad about not working these past few days. Why did she feel like she had been in the wrong and that she was taking advantage of him? Ah, another one. Just when Chen Guo was about to say something, Ye Xiu interrupted her. She hastily went up to look at Ye Xiu's screen. Lord Grimm was bravely charging towards a figure out in the distance. But as the distance shrunk and he saw the tag on top of the character's head, Ye Xiu was disappointed. He's not one. There were 12 guilds in Thousand Waves Lake. Apart from Thousand Creations and Horse Shooter, there were 94 others. Not all of these were Ye Xiu's targets because some of them hadn't participated in the conflict. There was also Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition, who had paid for protection, so Ye Xiu wouldn't touch them. The player in front of him wasn't a target. You won't find many if you search like this, Chen Guo said. That's just the way it is. Ye Xiu said as he clicked on Blue River's name on his friends list. What's the situation? What situation? Blue River added 3 exclamation marks to express his emotions. Did you find the whereabouts of any targets? Ye Xiu said. What targets? You know. This is to your benefit too. What are you hesitating for? Ye Xiu messaged. Blue River was gloomy. He was right. Telling him their whereabouts would definitely benefit their guild. But why did he always have the feeling that he had to resist? Just look at Tyrannical Ambition. They're so communicative, Ye Xiu said, while controlling Lord Grimm. He hadn't asked just Blue River. He had also asked Tyrannical Ambition's Cold Knight. Cold Knight was much more cooperative than Blue River and called out to all of the elites in Thousand Waves Lake. When he received Ye Xiu's message, he first asked something that he was curious about. God, were you not on in the morning? We had at least 3 reports in the morning. What a pity. Oh, then what about now? Ye Xiu asked. Only 1. Tell me, I'll go. Ye Xiu replied. Cold Knight happily sent Ye Xiu a name and his coordinates. Ye Xiu headed towards there while encouraging Blue River. Apart from these 2 guilds, there were 3 other guilds. However, these 3 guilds were in a neutral position. They couldn't gain anything from this sort of conflict, so they didn't join in. Just like how they wouldn't help the guilds pressure Lord Grimm, they wouldn't help Lord Grimm mess with the other guilds, so Ye Xiu didn't look for them. Taking Cold Knight's report, he quickly found and eliminated the target. Ye Xiu took out a notepad and wrote something down. Chen Guo looked and saw a list of characters from 7 guilds. Every time a character was killed, Ye Xiu would add a symbol to it. How tragic for Misty Castle. Their characters had a bunch of marks next to them. Are Misty Castle's players still here? Chen Guo couldn't help but ask. They had been killed to such an extent. I haven't encountered any. Ye Xiu said and opened up his friends list again. Let me ask around. Are you still leveling at Thousand Waves Lake? Ye Xiu messaged Hazy Mist. Hazy Mist's cheeks were streaked with tears. That had to be a type of arrogance. He implied that they were helpless and that they could only hide. What do you plan on doing? Hazy Mist's heart was weeping, but his reply sounded tough. Nothing, really. My friend just wants to know. Ye Xiu said and turned to look at Chen Guo. Chen Guo was already completely speechless looking at this exchange. We won't agree to your terms. Hazy Mist carried out his overall guild leader's wishes. What a coincidence. I won't either. Ye Xiu replied. Hazy Mist wept even harder. What do you mean? You won't either. Our players are suffering and you're probably just thinking how fun it is. Be careful. Don't let me bump into you. Ye Xiu sent another message to threaten Hazy Mist. Hazy Mist jumped up in fright and closed his messages to check his surroundings. He spun in a circle 3 times before confirming that he wasn't nearby. When will this end? Hazy Mist looked at his experience and continued to kill monsters. Even in normal circumstances, where there was no one terrorizing them while they were leveling, it would still be a few more days before they would leave Thousand Waves Lake. On Tyrannical Ambition's side, even though they were very enthusiastic in giving reports to Ye Xiu, They didn't consider Ye Xiu as an ally. Ignoring everything else, their identity as a branch of tyranny made them eternal enemies. Has there been any reaction from excellent dynasty? Jiang Yu hadn't forgotten his original thoughts. It doesn't seem like it, Cold Knight said. Could those idiots not have understood that no one can deal with Ye Xiu? Jiang Yu mumbled. In the blink of an eye, the daytime went by and day gradually turned into night. More and more players began coming online, but Thousand Waves Lake was the same. The scenic lake was as beautiful as before, but to the majority of the players there, the lake was full of danger. That afternoon, the players leveling at Thousand Waves Lake had died 11 times. The 7 guilds repeatedly confirmed the reports in order to understand the situation. If this record had been done entirely by chance, then either their opponent's luck was too amazing or there was something else going on. Could there be someone selling us out? They weren't idiots. The guilds were only working for their mutual interest, so it was easy for them to think of something like this. This was why, even though they were opponents, they still made an alliance. Making an alliance at least guaranteed that no one would make things worse. But some of the guilds were outside of their alliance, and those guilds were the first ones to be suspicious about. They could suspect them, but they had no proof. And even if they had proof, so what? They couldn't start a guild war because of this, could they? There hadn't been any large guild wars between the top guilds for a long time. This was because of the other guilds. When 2 guilds fought, the ones to benefit from the war wouldn't be them. This reasoning was something every guild leader understood after so many years of competing with each other. We can bear such a loss, but those conniving guilds are too terrible. Herb Garden's Arasima said hatefully. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 386 Chapter 386 Exploit which guild was giving away information behind their backs. The amount of suspicion towards other guilds could be divided into different levels. For example, the relatively weaker guilds who wanted to avoid having any part in the conflict were less suspicious. Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition had been involved with everyone else from the start, but then cut off communications with them. They were, without a doubt, the most suspicious. We can't let them go, a guild leader expressed. Yeah, if they want to give in to the terms, then that's fine. But if they're going to be like the legs of a dog after giving into the terms, we can't allow that. We can't allow that +1. We can't allow that +2. We can't allow that plus 10,086. The overall guild leaders from 7 of the top guilds were furious. The 10th server guild leaders looked calmer, though. As they quietly watched the discussion between these top guilds on how to deal with Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition, they suddenly felt that they needed to vent their anger. There was nothing they could against Ye Xiu, but Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition could become their punching bags. What? You died? Blue River turned indignant when he received Thundering Light's report. After creating a guild, he was beginning to scheme and play dirty tricks. Thinking of this, Blue River clicked on Lord Grimm's name and sent an angry face at him. Afterwards, he inquired, "What's going on?" Why'd you kill my player?" Blue River said righteously. "Did you make a mistake?" Shameless. Blue River didn't think that the other side would pretend that nothing had happened. At this moment, he received a new message. It was from Thundering Light. He hadn't been killed by Lord Grimm, but one of Herb Garden's players. Herb Garden. Blue River was in a daze. Did another guild do it? Ye Xiu's message floated in at just the right time. How did you know? You guys sold them out. How could they not take revenge? Ye Xiu asked in return. Blue River nearly choked. He had been the one urging him to sell the others out. Right now he was talking as if he had nothing to do with it. After being angry for a bit, Blue River suddenly realized. Did you know that this would happen? Who wouldn't have known? Ye Xiu replied. You purposefully asked us to give you reports in order to get us to fight like this, Blue River reasoned. You're thinking too much. The reports benefited both parties, so it was something that should be done. Ye Xiu said. You've gotten a lot of benefits, but we've run into trouble, Blue River said. It's troublesome for me too, Ye Xiu said. What trouble? My red name still hasn't gone away. Ye Xiu's reply looked as if he were having trouble saying it, making Blue River certain that this trouble was something that the other side had tried very hard in order to come up with something. Too evil, Blue River mumbled. How many of your guild members have died? Ye Xiu began to discuss matters properly. One isn't enough. Whether that's enough doesn't depend on me to decide. Blue River coughed up blood. After taking your materials, I should help you guys do some stuff. If you get attacked again, you can bring them over to me. Ye Xiu continued. Only at this moment did Blue River understand. He had been too shallow in his thinking. After creating a conflict, this could still be done. Blue Brook Guild's players became his fish bait. What could Blue Brook Guild do about it, though? If they did nothing, they wouldn't be able to handle the guild alliance's venting. If they did as they were told, they would establish much hate from the other guilds. That would be bad, too. Moreover, the overall guild leaders were currently the ones managing the guild on the 10th server now. It was possible that the fight here could carry over to the heavenly domain. Although the top guilds had always been fighting non-stop, fighting as the few against the many had never been done before. Everyone was always careful and never attracted the enmity of 2 guilds simultaneously. But now they would be provoking 7 guilds at the same time. That sort of strength was something no guild could defend against by themselves. What do we do? This was a matter of great concern. Blue River didn't want to make a hasty decision either, so he went to look for his guild leader, Changing Spring. In addition, he felt like this matter was complicated as well. He didn't think that he would be able to explain the situation clearly enough through brief messages like how Changing Spring talked in chat, so he went to speak to Changing Spring through voice. The same situation had fallen onto tyrannical ambition. After knowing that one of their elite players had died, but wasn't killed by Lord Grimm, Cold Knight quickly realized the gravity of the situation as well. Of course, he wouldn't be like Blue River and ask Lord Grimm. Instead, he directly went to contact Jiangyu. Asking us to give him reports was a trap. Cold Knight grieved. It was my bad. I was too hasty to gain an advantage and hadn't expected such an obvious development to happen. No. After hearing Cold Knight's report and self-criticism, Jiangyu paused for a long while before saying this single word. Cold Knight didn't understand what he meant by no, so he waited for Jiangyu to continue. As soon as we accepted the terms while others didn't, we fell into his trap, Jiangyu said. He really does deserve to be called Glory's most experienced god, an encyclopedia. Not only is he skilled in the pro scene, even for guild battles in-game, he also taught us a good lesson. He exploited the biggest weakness between our guilds. In the end, we're all competitors. The only reason we work together is for our mutual interests. We don't have any friends. Ever since we made different choices, we were destined to suspect each other. Asking us to give him reports is only one way. Even if he didn't use this, he would have other ways to sow doubt between the guilds. This is something we can't do anything about. The way we work determined our nature. This can't be changed. Jiangyu sent. No one interrupted. They all saw how helpless they were in this situation. Then what do we do now? Cold Knight asked. Things are already like this. Those other guilds won't stop either. We can't explain ourselves either unless we work together with them to fight Lord Grimm. Jiangyu said. This. Cold Knight held back a choke. They had already paid the materials in order to ensure that they could safely level. Lord Grimm didn't make trouble for them, but the other guilds did. If they turned around to fight Lord Grimm obviously wouldn't not fight back because they had given him materials. Everything would be back to how it was originally. The guilds who accepted the terms would have wasted their materials. The guilds who hadn't accepted the terms had suffered losses from deaths and pressure. Tyrannical ambition had the same style as their team tyranny. Backing down wasn't their nature. When they chose to agree to Lord Grimm's terms, that decision had already been difficult to bear. Plus, they had plans on what to do next. But now their tyrannical ambition was being forced to reach terms with the Guild Alliance. It was hard to say if they had any plans afterwards either. This made Cold Knight feel uncomfortable, as if he had swallowed a house fly. He believed that his guild leader Jiang Yu was feeling the same way. Since things are like this, it might be better to be more thorough, Jiang Yu suddenly said. Oh, we'll ally with Ye Xiu, Jiang Yu said. That's not good, right? Cold Knight hastily said, what about the heavenly domain and the other servers? If it was just the 10th server, allying with Ye Xiu to bully the other guilds would be a very easy decision. But the problem was, the 10th server was only a part of the top guild's influence. Ye Xiu was currently a huge problem here, but he wouldn't affect any other servers. A move here could affect everywhere else, and the consequences would be serious. In the heavenly domain and the other servers, if these guilds allied together and attacked, tyrannical ambition's days would become very difficult. We'll just have to try and see what happens, Jiang Yu said. Don't be hasty, guild leader, Cold Knight advised. He thought that Jiang Yu was unable to hold back his anger and was ready to let it out. In the end, Jiang Yu sent a smiley face. It seems like you still don't understand. What? Cold Knight was surprised. These chain of events were probably within Ye Xiu's calculations, Jiang Yu said. Cold Knight stared blankly. His mind was rapidly turning. The balance between the guilds has continued for many years, and with everyone's foundations, pulling up a guild from their roots isn't possible. This is why guilds avoid getting into any large-scale conflicts. Kill 1,000 enemies, lose 800 soldiers. If such a conflict happens, it might even be hard to say what advantages one gets from winning. Instead of a trade-off, it would be better if everyone developed happily together. It really would be difficult to deal with if the 7 guilds allied together, but they wouldn't gain much either. The sandpiper and clam war together while the fisher catches them both. Only an idiot would make such a move. Do you think the guild leaders are idiots? Jiang Yu said. But if there's a chance, Cold Knight was still worried. There's no chance. Any guild who would make such a move would have already died. Jiang Yu was extremely confident. Then you're saying, work together with Ye Xiu. If you find a target, report it to him. If they chase after you, look for him. Have our players stay together. Whether they dare to gather together in one area depends on how brave they are. Jiang Yu said, okay, I understand. Now that he understood the general direction, Cold Knight could figure out the details. First, borrow Ye Xiu's help to beat down these guys. Let them get a taste of hell. At the same time, this will help Ye Xiu's momentum. I don't believe that excellent era would kick out Ye Xiu and then quietly watch as he charges back into the pro scene. You want to be the fisher while the sandpiper and clams fight. We'll use this chance to kill 2 golden eagles with 1 arrow. Ye Xiu, you're a good card to play too. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 387 Chapter 387, still running. Jiang Yu made a clear analysis on the situation. With a definite plan in mind, he decided to make a temporary alliance with Ye Xiu and start a fight with their previous allies. As for Blue Brook Guild, Changing Spring had many years of experience as well. It wasn't hard to predict the direction events would play out towards. His line of thinking was the same as Jiang Yu's, and he made a similar decision. The other server guild leaders from these 2 guilds were all worried about the impact the decision would have overall. The 2 overall guild leaders both saw that a violent conflict nowadays wouldn't be a good idea, especially with a god like Ye Xiu attempting to make his comeback. How big such a conflict would turn out to be could be seen by the sorry figures of these 10th server guilds. Even though the top guilds had a much stronger foundation in the heavenly domain than the 10th server, Ye Xiu would also have a popularity that he didn't have in the 10th server. They had to take precautions in every area against this opponent. How could they give him any chances to take advantage of them? Only after weighing the pros and cons were the two overall guild leaders able to be at ease and bravely order their 10th server elites to ally with Ye Xiu. Understood. After everyone heard the order, they immediately began to carry them out. They stopped leveling in one specific area like before and began to wander around the entire leveling area. The difference between the two guilds was that tyrannical ambition moved in one large group, while Blue Brook Guild didn't require this, so they were free to do as they pleased. Those who wanted to form parties could form a party and level together. Those who wanted to level on their own, like Blue River, continued to guard a single area. Blue River didn't wander around. He had been deeply in admiration towards Changing Spring's analysis, but he didn't express it. Just listening to these calculations and plans made him feel tired, let alone thinking carefully about them. When he had played around in Guild Happy for a few days and became like a babysitter taking care of the new players, he didn't have to think so much about deceiving each other. It was much more fun. Sigh. Blue River didn't know why he sighed and continued to mechanically clear away monsters. He didn't know how the others were doing. He had been killing monsters for a while, but he hadn't received any news. There probably wasn't anything going on. If not, whether if someone had been killed or found a target, he would be the one to speak with Lord Grimm about it. How were things going to turn out? Blue River strolled around for a bit and once again thought of this. He was beginning to get distracted and was slowing down in his killing. Suddenly, he heard sounds of water being stirred violently. Even though he didn't have much experience in water battles, he could still tell that this sound wasn't normal. The experienced Blue River instantly took up his guard. He had his character turn his body over in the water and then watched as a bullet shot by him. Only one of the bullets had been dodged, the numerous other ones following connected with him. In the water, very few players were able to nimbly move around the water and dodge attacks. The blood that sprayed out from the bullets quickly faded away. Blue River had already turned his character around to see a sharpshooter standing there, pointing his gun at him. Herb Garden's player. Blue River could tell just from the player's name and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. He didn't want to find anyone, but they went to look for him, and it didn't seem like he'd be let go. However, if they were intending to kill him, they wouldn't send only one player. These elites, whether they were on land or in the water, their skill levels were very even. In addition, Blue River was considered to be one of the 5 great experts of Blue Brook Guild. His skill level was top-notch amongst normal players. The opponent wouldn't be so confident as to think that a single player could bring him down with certainty, just because he had made the first move. This was even more so for an old rival like Herb Garden. Blue River calmly thought and didn't hurry to attack the sharpshooter. While moving, he turned his character's camera and looked all around himself. Sure enough, the other side had 4 players. One of them was even their 10th server's guild leader, Plantago Seed. The 4 had taken advantage of the fact that Blue River was distracted and had already closed in. The reason the sharpshooter had fired at him was because they believed that Blue River had nowhere to run. A message popped up. Blue River looked and saw that Plantago Seed had sent him a smiley face. Blue River was too lazy to talk with him. He turned his character and immediately charged towards Plantago Seed. Plantago Seed didn't panic. He didn't go forward to welcome the fight. Instead, he slowly retreated and watched as the other 3 players closed in. Blue River also paid attention to his left and right. He didn't have the confidence in defeating Plantago Seed in just a few hits. The other 3 weren't far either. The sharpshooter had been attacking the entire time. If Plantago Seed stalled him for just a bit, they would be able to surround him, and his death would be certain. Plantago Seed understood this, too. Retreating was just a way to stall for time. He wasn't planning on staying away from Blue River the entire time. Seeing that his 3 allies were close, he stopped his retreat and waved the broom in his hands, whipping up a spray of water. Blue River had been charging bravely for a while, but when he got close enough to attack, he suddenly changed directions and his character dove down into the water. Plantago Seed saw this and immediately threw down a lava flask. When the lava flask was used on land, it would create a sea of fire wherever the flask broke. In the water, it had a different effect. The lava flowing out from the flask couldn't ignite the water, but it could make the water bubble. The waves spread the lava out, making it float all over the place, making the waters look like a polluted garbage dump. If a character touched the flameless lava, they would still take damage. Blue River understood this. But with his skill, not touching the lava wasn't easy for him. Blue River didn't want this to waste his time, though, so he took the damage and directly rushed out from the lava. Plantago Seed had already swam over after throwing the lava flask. His own skill wouldn't harm him. Seeing Blue River take the damage and rush out from the lava, he waved his arms and tossed out a shadow cloak in order to try and bind Blue River. But Blue River wasn't blindly running. He noticed Plantago Seed's movements, and as he came out of the lava, he used a skill. Plantago Seed had only just thrown out his mantle when he saw a blade light hit the mantle. It was already too late to dodge, and the sword draw connected with his body, sending him tumbling into the water. Plantago Seed was sad. He hadn't seen the attack at all. Why? Because the bubbling from his lava had blocked his line of sight. With just this short delay, Blue River was able to get out of the lava area. He had a few lava bits on him, but it didn't affect his movement speed. "Chase!" Plantago Seed called out to his team, and the four chased after him. "There's no escape." Plantago Seed messaged Blue River as his character lifted his head and rose from the water. He was a witch, so he could use his broom to move even faster than a launcher using aerial fire. He was confident that he could stop Blue River. Blue River ignored Plantago Seed. Seeing him rush over on the surface of the water, he understood his intent and immediately changed directions again. Plantago Seed was on top of the water, so he couldn't see far underwater. He could only chase according to the direction of the other three players. When Blue River changed directions, the three notified Plantago Seed. But their message had been a bit too slow, and Plantago Seed didn't know how far away he had been thrown off by. He could only wait for Blue River to come back up to the surface in order to know. "It's about time. You're still not going to go up to breathe," Plantago Seed casually messaged Blue River. In his eyes, Blue River's demise was just a matter of time. "I'm coming." This time, Blue River unexpectedly replied. Just as the message came out, half a body had come out from the water. If that wasn't Blue River, who else could it be? Plantago Seed saw this and immediately rushed forward on his broom. As soon as Blue River came up, he went to see where Plantago Seed was. He swam madly while paying attention to where Plantago Seed was. "Still running," Plantago Seed shouted. As he flew on his broom, he threw a magic missile to try and stop him. Blue River ignored the damage, though, and continued to swim madly. Herb Garden's three players had already came up to the surface of the water as well. They didn't have a movement speed advantage over Blue River, though. After chasing underwater for so long, the distance between them was the same. When the sharpshooter came up, he also used an aerial gun technique. It couldn't compare to an aerial cannon, but it was enough to move faster than a swimming player. "Still running, still running, still running." Plantago Seed yelled every time he threw a magic missile. He was having quite some fun chasing. Tiny Herb and Blue Rain were arch rivals, just like Excellent Era and Tyranny. The guilds in-game naturally held the same view. Blue River was one of Plantago Seed's rivals, too. At this moment, chasing him around felt extremely good. Magic Missile might only be a low-level skill, but several strikes of it still whittled down quite a chunk of Blue River's health. Plantago Seed quickly caught up with his movement speed advantage. He was even feeling a bit reluctant. He felt like slowly killing Blue River with Magic Missile was very fun. Was there any need to stop Blue River? He didn't hesitate because of this. It was only an afterthought when he caught up to Blue River. At the same time, he tossed a shadow cloak, ready to bind Blue River. But Blue River flipped his body and headed into the water, just barely dodging the shadow cloak. What a time waster. Plantago Seed helplessly said, "You guys continue watching him." "Yes," the three replied, and then they dove into the water. "I say this is pretty interesting. Where can you run to?" Plantago Seed messaged Blue River. "It's about time," Blue River replied. "What?" Plantago Seed stared blankly for a bit. A message flashed. Plantago Seed opened it and saw the three type simultaneously. "Lord Grimm, The King's Avatar, Volume 5, Ace Showdown, Chapter 388, Chapter 388. To move a stone and stub one's foot, Blue River, how despicable." Plantago Seed suddenly came to a realization. Blue River had been blindly wandering around, waiting for help, and the help he got was way too excessive. It was so excessive that Plantago Seed was so powerless to do anything that all he could do was roar angrily on top of the lake. Soon afterwards, his character could no longer be controlled. A spout of water lifted his body up as Plantago Seed was launched into the air. He turned his camera to look, and the same situation that had befallen his three allies as well. How had Lord Grimm blasted all of four of them into the sky at the same time? Plantago Seed couldn't imagine how. The instant he looked down, the fifth player shot out of the water. On top of his head was the hateful Lord Grimm. Plantago Seed only had two thoughts on his mind. One, how much he despised Blue River, and two, how he was going to escape. "There's got to be a chance," Plantago Seed shuddered. Lord Grimm was Ye Xiu, that much was true, but they had four players. If they all scattered and ran, at least three of them should be able to escape, right? Who was going to be the first target, though? Plantago Seed was trying to guess, when suddenly he saw that Lord Grimm had decided to swim towards his direction. He immediately wanted to cry, but then again, there really wasn't any need to guess. As the guild leader who wouldn't go after him, was there any need to think about who else the opponent would attack? Seeing that it had already been decided, Plantago Seed could only take responsibility as the guild leader and shout, "Hurry up and run!" "Run where?" someone responded to him. This voice was different, but the tone was very familiar. Plantago Seed heard it and wanted to rip his hair out in anger. The voice was Blue River's, but the tone was the same as when he had previously been chasing after Blue River and throwing magic missiles. "Blue River, you have no future. I despise you. If you've got the guts, 1v1 me," Plantago Seed shouted. Blue River wasn't having an easy time either. Originally, he hadn't wanted to help God and gather intelligence for him, but the enemies had started to come look for him. First, the opponents were from Herb Garden, and Blue River didn't like them. Second, God had come asking him for intelligence at that time, so Blue River gave him a report because it was convenient for him. As a result, God provided him a direction to go towards. Blue River had swum madly in that direction and received his welcoming. In an instant, the situation turned around, but Plantago Seed's denouncement made Blue River speechless. In the end, Ye Xiu replied, "1v1, you think this is a competitive match. In this game, it's the many who bully the few, and you call yourself a guild leader. Your comprehension skills are too poor." After saying this, Lord Grimm received the falling Plantago Seed with an attack. The scene afterwards would make those who saw it terrified. "FCK your mother. You can keep me in the air endlessly from the water," Plantago Seed cried. He didn't even get the chance to fall into the water. "Don't be too fascinated by me. Pay attention to the player that is in your hands. I'm talking to you, Thousand Creations," Ye Xiu shouted. "Oh," someone replied from a different direction. Thousand Creations had been distracted, and the opponent that he had been fighting all along had slipped away. He hastily chased after him. Plantago Seed suddenly realized that Lord Grimm wasn't the only opponent there. Soft Mist, Thousand Creations, and Blue River were there too. Those three each took care of one of his three brothers. Plantago Seed was completely speechless. Even a god like Ye Xiu was playing with others. What could he say? Finally, Plantago Seed dropped into the water. He had run out of health, and with a heart unwilling to accept it, he revived back at the city. "How's it going? Can you guys hold on?" Ye Xiu turned to ask the other three. "It's no good, hurry and help me." The person to speak was a female voice, which naturally meant that it was from Soft Mist. Those who were familiar with her would be very surprised, because how could Tang Ru say something like that? In truth, it was because the person controlling Soft Mist wasn't Tang Ru, but Chen Guo. Tang Ru was currently working at the cash register at the front desk. It was currently during peak hours, so she didn't have time to play the game. As a result, Chen Guo took the chance to play on her account. Chen Guo respected Ye Xiu very much, so she liked the battle mage class. She had even leveled up a low-level account, but in truth she had never played it seriously, so she wasn't familiar with the class. Plus, the opponent in front of her was an elite from the top guilds. They were more skilled than her, so fighting against one was extremely difficult for her. If she continued to fight, she would be the one to die. Luckily, Ye Xiu was lightning fast. It had taken him less than a minute to take down Plantago Seed, and this herb garden elite wasn't good enough to beat the experienced Chen Guo in less than a minute. Ye Xiu rushed over to help, and the situation immediately became as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Chen Guo also took the chance to take revenge. However, because she was in the water and because she was unfamiliar with the class, many of her skills hit Ye Xiu's Lord Grim. Fortunately, attacks from players in the same party didn't do damage. Otherwise, Lord Grim would probably have taken the same amount of damage as their opponent. With a second one dead, next were the other two sides. Blue River was fighting steadily and was revolving around his opponent. For now, the battle was even. On the other side, Thousand Creations was currently chasing his opponent because he had been distracted previously. He was relying on his battle mage's movement speed buff from the chasers in order to gradually close the distance. Ye Xiu saw this and immediately controlled his Lord Grim to rush over to Thousand Creations' side while telling Chen Guo, "You go help Blue River." "Okay." Chen Guo listened and swam over. She raised her arms and used a dragon tooth, but the waves crashed against her and her character moved over to the side. The dragon tooth, which was supposed to be towards the herb garden player, slipped and stabbed towards Blue River. Luckily, Blue River had moved a bit too. The dragon tooth didn't connect and swiped past him. "Sister, which side are you on?" Blue River cried out in surprise. "Sorry, it was an accident." Chen Guo apologized in shame. "Hurry up and add me to the party." "Add me," Blue River shouted. Lord Grim and the others were in the same party, but Blue River wasn't. He would still take damage from them. If the dragon tooth had connected, it'd be the same as if an enemy had injured him. "Add him to the party." Chen Guo was afraid that Ye Xiu wouldn't hear her, so she turned her head to give Ye Xiu a shout. Ye Xiu was currently chasing after his target and trying to cut him off. He sent a party invite to Blue River, which Blue River immediately accepted. Chen Guo controlled Soft Mist and kept a distance away from Blue River. She was familiar with Ye Xiu, so it didn't matter. But in front of a stranger, Chen Guo couldn't lose too much face. Her following attacks were much more careful. Blue River's skill had originally been above his opponent's. Now, with a bit of help, his superiority was clear and he quickly seized the advantage. The opponent didn't want to fight either. He knew that no matter hard he fought, once Lord Grim came around, he was a dead man, which was why he had been trying to escape the entire time. However, Blue River was an experienced player and didn't let him get a chance to run. Finally, after getting Chen Guo's help, the elite wasn't even able to last until Lord Grim got there and died under Blue River's sword. "Blue River, you're shameless." This brother didn't forget to pass on their guild leader's spirit when he died. Being told like that in front of a lady was quite embarrassing for Blue River. Chen Guo didn't care though. Seeing that the opponent had been taken care of, she immediately looked towards Ye Xiu's and Thousand Creations' direction. "How's it going over there? You think there's any suspense?" Blue River wasn't worried at all. "Stupid, why am I watching like this?" Chen Guo's words made Blue River somewhat confused. Chen Guo turned her head to look at Ye Xiu's screen. Ye Xiu had just caught up. And just like what Blue River had said, there wasn't any suspense. A bunch of attacks came out. In Chen Guo's eyes, Thousand Creations help only ruin the beauty. "You guys are done over there." Ye Xiu easily cleaned up the remaining player and asked Chen Guo. "Done." Chen Guo put her thumbs up. Ye Xiu nodded his head and messaged Blue River. "Not bad, not bad, pulling 4 players at once. You're quite a good taunter." Blue River had no words to say. "Keep up the good work," Ye Xiu said. Still no words. "Don't be too scared. There are a lot of options in the water. Most players aren't good in the water either, so as long as you can stay alive for a while, I'll be able to rush over," Ye Xiu said. "I'm going to level." Blue River didn't want to say anything. Go ahead, go ahead. If anything comes up, call me," Ye Xiu replied. Blue River's misdeeds had naturally been exposed by Plantago Seed. The 7 top guilds condemned Blue River, but as time went on, they discovered that Blue River wasn't the only one to do this. Every player from Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition did this. These 2 guilds had entered the struggle again. However, this time, they were standing on Lord Grimm's side and were bullying the other guilds. This made these 7 top guilds even angrier, but there was nothing they could do. Killing a player in the water wasn't easy for them. Now, the players from these 2 guilds could call on Lord Grimm for help if they ever got targeted. For such a god like Ye Xiu, he wasn't acting proper in any way. He was like a summoned creature and would arrive whenever he was called upon. The players from those 2 guilds were no longer his targets but his bait. The most shameless ones were the bait, who were acting extremely arrogant. They went around Thousand Waves Lake showing off. Any fish they discovered would be chased after. And then, Lord Grimm would quickly be summoned over and the fish would be caught. The players from the 7 top guilds cried. They had originally wanted to carefully hide from Guild Happy's few players. But the number of players they had to hide from now were too many. Attacking the players from those 2 guilds were like moving a rock to stub their own toe. Did it make a difference? A guild leader was still comforting himself. Those 2 guilds had already chosen to stand on that side. Even if we didn't chase after them, they would have helped Lord Grimm look for us. Whether or not we went to kill them didn't matter, no. It didn't make a difference, but the problem is that we can't compare to Ye Xiu in the water. Not only did we not make a comeback, we suffered even more losses. How many of our players have been killed today? Everyone went silent. They didn't have the heart to count how many of their players had died. On the other hand, Ye Xiu had taken note of every kill in his notebook, The King's Avatar, Volume 5, Ace Showdown, Chapter 389. Chapter 389. 3 choices. The top 7 guilds persisted under the increased pressure. They felt that Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition had been telling Lord Grimm about their whereabouts since long ago, so the general situation hadn't changed much from how it was before. It had been a mistake on their part to have their players take the initiative to look for trouble, though. In the end, the problem laid in their weakness in the water. They had no way of killing their targets fast enough, thus giving their targets enough time to stall till Lord Grimm arrived. The guild leaders of these top 7 guilds were all very flexible people. Once they saw that their actions weren't working, they despised Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition. Then they decisively changed their plans. They would then continue with their previous hiding plan and would not take the initiative to attack. Going back and forth had only caused more trouble for them. Ye Xiu's side was completely unconcerned. They continued to level while still wandering around and reporting their situations. Any single enemy that they met would be killed. A bit later into the night, Su Macheng came online. With another overwhelmingly powerful killer, the pressure only increased for these top 7 guilds. Time passed. Ye Xiu's group was as happy as ever. Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition were also in high spirits. Against other guilds backed by clubs, this type of pressure they exerted, which made their opponents run away on sight of them without any intentions of fighting, was truly something that they hadn't felt in a long, long time. They deeply felt, through experience, how comfortable it was to cool in the shade under a large tree. Midnight arrived, and finally, it came time for the dungeons to refresh. The players from those top 7 guilds had been tense the entire day. Dungeon running was usually the time where they had to concentrate and focus, but now it felt like a resting time for them. In the dungeon, they wouldn't have to worry about someone suddenly popping up out of nowhere and attacking them. Dungeon! Dungeon! The elites from the guilds eagerly cheered. We can finally rest. The branch guild leaders from those top 7 guilds muttered in their hearts. They were a part of the elite teams and had been tense like the others for the entire day. Form 2 parties of 4. The higher-up guild members passed on the order. PvE wasn't a problem for players of their skill level. A party of 4 would clear a dungeon with ease. However, there was no chance for them to beat the dungeon record. Though with their current conditions, entering the dungeon was the same as taking a vacation. They didn't have the energy to go all out for a dungeon record. The branch guild leaders from these 7 top guilds hadn't thought that their orders to do this would strike a huge blow to their guilds. After finishing their first runs, they were then ambushed. Against top-tier experts like Sima Cheng and Ye Xiu, they didn't even have a chance of entering the dungeon again. 2 teams had been wiped out by these 2 players. At the other dungeon entrances, Tang Ru, Thousand Creations, Blue Brook Guild's players and Tyrannical Ambition's players had been waiting to ambush them. Through their numbers advantage, they were able to wipe out another 2 teams. One dungeon run resulted in 4 teams being wiped out. The 4 teams had belonged to 4 different guilds, immediately causing those 4 guilds to go mad. Soon after, they realized that just before midnight came, their opponents had already begun to monitor their movements at the dungeon entrances. When they saw a team enter, they didn't reveal themselves. Instead, they dispatched troops to wait for them to finish the dungeons and then ambush them. The players from these top 7 guilds had been on high alert the entire day and were exhausted. When midnight came, their only desire was to enter the dungeons and relax. They had been too impatient and too careless. Not a single player had thought about taking precautions against such a simple move. It was too late to regret it now, though. The 4 guilds who had their teams wiped out immediately thought that if their opponents were only able to guard those 4 entrances, then it meant that they didn't have enough manpower to cover every single entrance. In terms of numbers, their opponents had around 20 players. In theory, it was possible for them to know the whereabouts of every one of their teams. Thinking about this, those 4 guilds immediately notified the other guilds to take advantage of the fact that their opponents weren't there waiting and to hurry up and find a different dungeon entrance to enter. The teams of the 3 guilds that weren't affected were too late after hearing this news. Their players had already entered the dungeons a second time. It was already too late to change dungeon entrances. If they exited the dungeon forcefully, they would waste one of their runs. In addition, it wasn't worth it for them to enter an endangered status. But if they cleared the dungeon, came out, and met an ambush, they would also suffer many losses. If they wanted to run away safely, they could log off in the middle of the dungeon. However, if they did that, they wouldn't be leveling and would suffer even greater losses. Helpless, the guilds could only face the dangers. First, they would clear the dungeon and then hope that their team's whereabouts hadn't been discovered. As a result, after coming out of the dungeon for the second time, the teams who hadn't encountered anyone cried out at their good luck. The teams who had encountered players, though, could only accept their deaths. This time around, 2 teams had been caught and killed. The 7 guilds saw this and knew that their opponents really had known where they were beforehand and came again to clean them up. They immediately had their teams change positions. They did what they could. But after suffering heavy losses 2 times, the teams all felt uneasy. Dungeoning had originally been their time to relax, but they became so nervous that some of them made serious mistakes, causing their team to wipe out. Unfortunately, Ye Xiu didn't know about this. If he had, he would have drawn a few more Roman 20s on his notepad. After the last run, another round of both happiness and sadness came about. Some of the teams had been noticed, and the result was still the same. Midnight was supposed to be their time to relax, but it turned out to be the time for the peak of deaths. The players from the 7 guilds spat out blood with ashen-colored faces. The experience loss from one death would take several hours of leveling in order to make up for it. The leveling speed of these 7 guilds had clearly slowed down. The top 100 characters on the level standing had a huge change. Even though there was a lot of luck involved in who was killed, in general, the elites from these 7 guilds were steadily dropping. During the peak of deaths, their 3 runs at 1,000 Waves Lake finished. Everything was in chaos for these guilds. They had no idea what to do next. After taking a hit in the experience area, everyone's morale was extremely low. Even those who hadn't been killed during the peak didn't feel happy at all. The elites were split into 2 sections. One section had just died and revived back at the city. They had no spirit left in them and didn't want to come out. The second section's players were safe, floating around on 1,000 Waves Lake like lonely ghosts. They were just happy to be getting by. At this moment, the guild leaders of these 7 guilds didn't feel good saying stuff like, "Don't give up." Because what was the point in persisting? Everyone had been very careful and on high alert, but they were all killed anyways. For the dungeon ambushes, even if they had predicted that it would happen, there wasn't much that they could have done about it. Just when everyone was pacing back and forth, the 10th server guild leaders from these 7 guilds all received a message from Lord Grimm. "You're still not going to give in. Is there any point?" Yeah, what was the point? The 7 guild leaders received this message, but none of them became angry. After thinking about it for some time, the 7 all felt the same. There really wasn't any point in persisting. Their original motive was to kill 1,000 creations, so that Guild Happy wouldn't be able to create a dungeon team. But the result? Not only were they not able to kill 1,000 creations, Guild Happy's god attacked back terrifyingly all day long. Right now, their goal had turned into reducing their losses at 1,000 Waves Lake by as much as possible. As for Guild Happy, they were attacking them non-stop, while their dungeon team was formed because of 1,000 creations and Horse Shooter's addition. What was the point in acting like this? If they had done nothing, they might have been able to level up peacefully. But they had to bring trouble on themselves and turn a nice, peaceful leveling area into a bloody danger zone. Their leveling speed had slowed down, and they didn't have the ability to snipe at Happy's dungeon team. Their efforts were no longer towards gaining any benefits, but rather reducing losses. There was nothing that they could do to avoid these losses either. The guilds all shared the losses. Some were lucky and some were not. Some had died miserably, while some had laughed sneakily. However, this wouldn't be the only day. It might not even end on the 5th day. These sorts of days would only end once they leveled out of the 1,000 Waves Lake leveling area. They could retreat and level at Sin City or go to the leveling area higher than 1,000 Waves Lake. However, the veterans chose to stay at 1,000 Waves Lake, naturally because it was the most efficient place for them to level. Retreating would be taking a loss. Now they had 3 choices in front of them. 1, they could retreat and go to a lower or higher leveling area than 1,000 Waves Lake, which would make their characters level slower. 2, They could negotiate with Lord Grimm and pay him materials for their safety. They would lose materials but would guarantee just about everything else. 3. They could continue to bear the pressure and the dangers, hiding from Lord Grimm's company and level. They had no idea what would happen if they chose this option. This option depended on luck. For example, Misty Castle had suffered the most, but Royal Heritage hadn't suffered very much. Compared to the first and second choices, this third choice might be the best for them. The seniors of these 7 guilds once again started discussing the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com, Chapter 390. Chapter 390. Accept surrender, the same problem with the same result. After carefully pondering about the issue, the 7 guild leaders chose to eliminate the third option. This risk for it was too high to take. Apart from the pressure they had previously, there was still a harsh reality right in front of them. If any of the 7 guilds switched sides, they would be like Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition, and immediately switch sides to take advantage of their misfortune. Don't look at how they were all despising and indignant at Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition. If they had been in the same situation, any guild would switch sides faster than flipping a page in a book, especially in an online virtual environment. None of them would even feel bad about it at all. There was no such thing as an eternal friendship, only an eternal interest. They thought about how if they continued to push forward with their current situation and other guilds switched sides, they would be under even more pressure. No guild would dare continue wasting their resources at Thousand Waves Lake like that. Next was the issue of retreating or agreeing to the terms. Retreating meant leaving the Thousand Waves Lake leveling area, and agreeing to the terms meant paying Lord Grimm materials. The former would result in a loss of experience, while the latter would result in a loss of materials. There was only one option that could be chosen. From an emotional standpoint, agreeing to the terms felt more oppressive. Even though the guild leaders put their interests first, they couldn't ignore their guild members' feelings. At this moment, Lord Grimm's identity as God Ye Xiu provided them with comfort. After eliminating the third choice, whether or not they would retreat or agree to the terms was no longer an issue of weighing the advantages and disadvantages, but rather the feelings of their guilds. The 7 guilds also knew that they wouldn't gain anything from delaying, so they quickly came to their decision. Ye Xiu received messages from 5 of the 7 guilds probing him out, asking what they should do as they didn't want to continue on like this. Ye Xiu didn't say anything and simply sent them a list of materials. The 5 guild leaders who received the list were already prepared, but when they saw it, they couldn't help but grind their teeth. Compared to the previous price, there were clearly more materials on this new list. There was nothing that they could do. Times had changed. A price increase wasn't something that the 5 guilds hadn't expected. The 5 guilds could only curse angrily in their hearts, but no one made any objections. They replied, giving their approval. Soon after, the 2 sides agreed on a trade location. The location would be in a safe area in the city. Naturally, this was to prevent any traps. When they arrived, 5 players from the 5 guilds were all gathered together. All of them were in the top 100 places on the level standings. Even though these guilds had a frustrating day mixing up the level standings, the list of names hadn't changed. However, if they had continued resisting, it would be hard to say that new faces wouldn't appear on the level standings. It's been a long day, everyone. Ye Xiu had come alone. Even though the other side had more players, they had already accepted their full defeat. No one said anything, so in the end, Ye Xiu began. His words made everyone choke. "Who wants to come trade first?" Ye Xiu asked. "I'll go." One of the characters walked towards Lord Grimm. It was only an in-game character, but he gave a sort of dejected feeling. They discovered that it really was as if they had accepted surrender and were currently paying reparations. Oh, it's you." Ye Xiu looked at the first player's name. He flipped open his notebook. You died 4 times. It must have been very difficult. The Misty Castle player who died 4 times hastily finished the trade and hurried away in tears. You died 3 times. Couldn't have been easy. The second player, who was from Herb Garden, was commented on by Ye Xiu too. He too quickly completed the trade and left. 4 times. 2 times. Wow, not bad, you never died once. What do you think? Want to join our guild? Happy. Our guild is in need of lucky people like you. The last player to come up didn't have any XS next to him. Ye Xiu was amazed and even tried to rope him in, but the other side left angrily after the trade. You're too evil. Chen Guo watched as Ye Xiu received the materials. She knew that Ye Xiu wasn't sincerely trying to rope him over, but rather mocking him. In game speak, this was a type of trash talk. She laughed while looking down at how shameless Ye Xiu was. 5 guilds, there are still 2 guilds left. It seems like they're not willing. Ye Xiu looked at his notebook. In the end, only 301 and Howling Heights hadn't contacted him. I'll confirm. Ye Xiu had both guild leaders on his friends list and immediately messaged them. The replies from the 2 were practically the same. They were going to hide. A shame. Ye Xiu sighed. He obviously preferred that they give him materials. By retreating to a different leveling area, their leveling speed might slow down, but Guild Happy wouldn't be able to gain much from it. They were on a different level than Guild Happy. Their retreat probably made the other guilds that were backed by clubs happier. As for Ye Xiu, he would rather have these types of material goods. Our rewards were quite good. Ye Xiu was very satisfied with his bag filled with materials. Even though the materials he had obtained weren't all necessary for his 1000-chance umbrella, with this capital, he could buy or trade the materials he needed. Next, apart from a few extremely rare materials, the remaining ones had been obtained. He could completely upgrade his 1000-chance umbrella to level 50 without a problem. But the more important part was how he would upgrade it later. This was because Ye Xiu would no longer have a clear list of materials that was needed to upgrade the umbrella. The path would require thinking, researching, and testing. During this process, it was possible that he might choose the wrong materials and ruin his 1000-chance umbrella. If that happened, his only choice would be to start over, which was why he couldn't stop accumulating materials. Ye Xiu wasn't confident that he could succeed in the level 50-70 stage on his first try. Even if he did succeed, he might not be completely happy with the result. For upgrading the 1000-chance umbrella, level 50 and below only required that he get the materials. After level 50 was the true beginning. After thinking through this, Ye Xiu put his newly acquired materials into the storage room. In the beginning, he had earned materials by substituting in. Later on, he had bet with Wang Jixi. Then he moved on to selling dungeon guides. Finally, he received reparations from this time's surrender. His storage room was filled with materials from bottom to top. Moreover, these were all uncommon materials. The glittering treasures made Chen Guo's eyes fall off. She was only a normal glory player, so all of the uncommon materials she had gained over her many years of playing wouldn't even come close to that amount. How do you play this game? Chen Guo felt like she was going to cry. Ye Xiu left the storage room and received a message. Cold Knight was still happily reporting his findings. Oh, there's no need anymore, Ye Xiu replied. What? Cold Knight asked. They won't be looking for trouble anymore, Ye Xiu replied. Ah, Cold Knight immediately understood. He couldn't help but think of something though. Weren't you the one who was looking for trouble? Everything had been dealt with. On Thousand Waves Lake, 301 and Howling Heights had already left the leveling area. Pretending to leave and then sneakily coming back to level was an option, but no guild was in the mood to do that. The guilds were done with leveling while being on high alert at all times. After telling Cold Knight, Ye Xiu messaged Blue River. There's no need to report anymore. What? Blue River also asked. They won't be looking for trouble anymore. Ye Xiu replied in the same way. Weren't you the one who was looking for trouble? Blue River wasn't like Cold Night and directly said his thoughts. You guys started it, Ye Xiu said. You dug out our players first, Blue River reminded. I didn't. I only said that I was Ye Xiu. They left themselves. Can't you ever say the truth? Blue River wanted to cry. He had lost again. We're going to dungeon. There's a spot. Want to come? Ye Xiu asked Blue River. The guilds had finished their 3 runs. It was almost 2 already. Suma Cheng had a match tomorrow, so she had to go to sleep early and had already logged off. Blue River. If you guys put 5 players on a team, there are still 3 players left who aren't in one, right? Want me to carry one of them? Ye Xiu continued to ask. If you carry one, what about the other 2? Blue River exclaimed angrily. Oh, Ye Xiu replied and quickly followed. Both of us messed up. After 5 players form a team, there will only be 2 left. Blue River stared blankly. Then he realized that there was 1,000 creations who had left the guild, so there were only 2 players left. 2 players can't run the dungeon. No, we can carry one, Ye Xiu said. What about the other one? Blue River asked. Find another guild to party with, Ye Xiu suggested. In truth, the first-string troops often formed a mismatched team. This was because each guild had 8 first-string players. In order to beat a record, they would need 5 players. The remaining 3 could clear a dungeon, but it would be difficult. And since they were the only ones there, they didn't want to waste time, and many just formed parties with members from other guilds. Ye Xiu's suggestion was a common measure that the guilds took. It was just that Blue River felt that forming a team with Happy's players would be setting a bad example for the others. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 391 Chapter 391. The breeze is still. The waves are calm. The guilds felt a bit dispirited towards the dungeon records. There was no way to stop Lord Grimm from forming a dungeon team. They felt like no matter how hard they tried, second place would be the highest that they could ever achieve. There was no fun in that. As a result, some of the teams didn't care about having 5 players in a team before dungeoning. 8 players could be split into 2 teams of 4. A team of 4 was enough to beat a dungeon. However, Blue Brook Guild had 1 less player because 1,000 creations had left. 7 players split into 2 teams meant 1 team of 3 and 1 team of 4. Unless there was no other choice, they didn't want the team of 3 to struggle on their way through the dungeon. You guys form one first. Bound Boat and I will look for players from other guilds to party with. Blue River was a kind guild leader. He made arrangements for the subordinates first before thinking about himself. I say that there won't be any other guilds to party with, Bound Boat said. Blue River stared blankly before remembering. In Thousand Waves Lake, besides God Ye Xiu's group, only Blue Brook Guild and Tyrannical Ambition hadn't finished their 3 runs for the day. Aren't there players from Tyrannical Ambition? They just happen to have 3 extra. We can form a party with them, Blue River said as he messaged Cold Night. But it turned out that the other side had split their 8 players into 2 teams of 4, and the 2 teams had already entered the dungeon. It seems like our only option is to struggle our way through the dungeon with just 3 players, Bound Boat said helplessly after learning about the situation. Blue River also sighed. The 7 of them could only split into 1 team of 4 and 1 team of 3. The 2 teams entered the dungeon. In the end, Blue River ignored Ye Xiu's invite. Chen Guo saw Ye Xiu's invite get rejected. Why did Ye Xiu want to invite him? It was because their team had Suma Cheng, whose free time was limited. There were 3 reasons for why Suma Cheng had a high level. One reason was because when she first started, Ye Xiu had spent time to carry her through. Another reason was because she was good at the game. Her leveling speed was a bit faster than normal players. The third reason was because of the Christmas event. However, even though Ye Xiu, Suma Cheng and Tang Ru had gained by far the most in the Christmas event, it could still be seen from the level standings that no matter how skilled they were, They couldn't compare to the top guilds. 24/7 leveling. Ye Xiu saw that in the end, only 4 players would enter the dungeon. Suma Cheng's character wouldn't be able to do this run, so she would definitely fall behind in experience. If she kept on doing this, she would naturally fall further and further behind. Chen Guo couldn't help but be concerned. If you guys go dungeon now, what about Suma Cheng? When she comes back tomorrow, she won't have anyone to dungeon with. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't wait for her. She doesn't have time tomorrow either. She has a match to play, Ye Xiu said. She's so busy. It must be tough. Chen Guo felt her heart ache for her idol. It's not too bad. She doesn't spend too much time online. She can make it up with her skill, Ye Xiu said. No matter how good she is, she can't compare to the top guilds. 24/7 leveling, no. Chen Guo used to be a part of a top guild, so she knew of this too. That's true, Ye Xiu acknowledged. Actually, my chasing haze is at the maximum level, and I've also just left the guild, so I don't have a set team to dungeon with. I can let her sit there for now. Chen Guo was speaking as if her tongue were in a knot. It wasn't at all like her usual unrestrained self. So you're saying you can help her level? Ye Xiu understood what she was trying to get at. Yes, yes, yes. Chen Guo nodded her head furiously. She was a bit excited. Playing on the same account as her idol, how fun would that be? You would have to keep on moving the card around. You won't find that annoying, Ye Xiu said. Not at all, not at all. Chen Guo shook her head furiously and became even more excited. This was another reason to be happy about. In Glory, the account was tied to the card. To get someone else to level, it required handing over the account card. This would mean that she would be able to see her idol every day. Thinking of this, Chen Guo couldn't help but smile. Boss, how old are you? Ye Xiu suddenly asked. What? Chen Guo couldn't understand why he asked this question. Her age. Didn't Ye Xiu already know it? Boss, you're so old already, yet you're still acting like a little girl chasing stars, Ye Xiu said. Are you looking to die? Chen Guo jumped up in anger. She looked around but couldn't find anything she could grab to hit someone with. The mouse and keyboard in her hands were newly bought for her to use, and she liked them very much. The monitor, too expensive. The chair, too big. Too much commotion wouldn't be good. Cough, cough. Your words make a lot of sense. If you help her level, you take a big load off of our shoulders. The guild's development is at a crucial moment right now. Boss's decision is very wise. Ye Xiu hastily corrected himself. Tang Ru had turned to look at them and was holding back from laughing. Ye Xiu's bunch of words had calmed Chen Guo down a lot. Chen Guo sat down, not knowing whether to laugh or to cry. Then how do you think we should do this? For leveling, my character is actually the most crucial. Boss, if you really care, help me level, Ye Xiu said. Help you? Chen Guo's interest had clearly gone down. If it was before, she would have gone crazy from excitement if she could help Ye Xiu level. But after knowing that Ye Xiu was Ye Xiu, Chen Guo's adoration for the god had weakened. Okay, she still agreed though. Don't sound so disheartened. My account is very fun to play, see? Ye Xiu quickly switched forms for the 1,000 Chance umbrella, showing what parts of Lord Grimm were fun. Got it. Chen Guo nodded her head. The 1,000 Chance umbrella really was fun to play with. It was just that Chen Guo wasn't familiar with other classes. The few times that she had played on Lord Grimm were all played as if Lord Grimm were a gunner. If she was going to substitute level, then she could try some other things. Let me tell you something first. I can't play as crazily as you guys. When you're not using it and I get tired, I won't be leveling it. Chen Guo bluntly stated her condition. What if it was Suma Cheng's account? Ye Xiu asked. Chen Guo narrowed her eyes. Are you saying how can I be compared to her? Ye Xiu was helpless. He was clearly more of a god than Suma Cheng. While Ye Xiu chatted with Chen Guo, he was also playing in the 1,000 Waves Lake Dungeon. 1,000 Creations and Horse Shooter were veterans. They didn't need Ye Xiu to tell them much. His hands moved effortlessly, and the 1,000 Chances umbrella continuously switched forms. All sorts of low-level skills were used. He was definitely the team's nucleus. With him watching over the team and no beginners to mess things up, their team easily cleared the dungeon. At this moment, Blue River was feeling quite down. He had taken care of his subordinates as a kind guild leader, giving the position to be in a 4-player team to others. His dungeon run was filled with dangers and frustrations. In the end, they were unable to hold off the second boss. Someone made a mistake, and the boss wiped their team out. The difficulty of the dungeon was much more difficult than leveling out in the wild. Dying was a very common occurrence. There was no benefit in dying to a dungeon. Players would still be penalized. At the start of the game, quite a few players criticized this setting. But Glory was 10 years old now. The veterans were completely used to this setting and were too lazy to say anything about it anymore. The only convenient part about dying in a dungeon was that, after reviving, players would be sent to the dungeon entrance. They wouldn't be revived back in the city, where they would have to run back to the dungeon if they wanted to try again. Right now, the three were gathered outside of the dungeon entrance. They consoled themselves while waiting for the critically ill state to wear off. At this moment, Blue River received another message from Ye Xiu. Died. Blue River stared blankly. If his death had been known, could that mean that one of the two brothers in front of him were from the other side? How did you know? The level standings. Blue River immediately flipped open the level standings and looked. He hadn't leveled much on his account these past 5 days. With his death, his experience slid down. Lord Grimm and Tang Ru had surpassed him now. Oh, Blue River replied after looking at the level standings. We're lacking one player, Ye Xiu repeated. Blue River stared blankly for a bit and then said to the other two, You go with Lord Grimm's team, they have a spot there. Ah, that player was startled. Bound Boat, you go with Flower Lantern's team. It seems like they're having some trouble without a cleric, Blue River said to Bound Boat. Their team of 3 had a cleric which would help keep them safe. However, because of the cleric, their damage output would be weak. But without a cleric, they weren't confident in beating the dungeon just through skill alone. This was why their team composition was a bit difficult to deal with. What about you? The two said nearly simultaneously. I haven't leveled in 5 days. Missing 1 day won't be a big deal. I'll go dungeon at Sin City, Blue River said to the two of them. He contacted Ye Xiu and sent their guild member over. Oh, what about you? Ye Xiu asked. I'll go look around somewhere else. Blue River was quite relaxed. You don't have a team, that means you have nothing to do. Why not help carry some players? Ye Xiu suggested. Get out of here, I'm busy, Blue River set off. Ye Xiu sent him some ellipses. No more words were said that night. After finishing the dungeon, everyone leveled at Thousand Waves Lake and everything was finally peaceful again. The top guilds were still a bit nervous, but after seeing that Lord Grimm really wasn't going to attack them because he had received their materials, they gradually began to relax. He would even say hi sometimes when they came near. However, his greetings were too nasty. Their names were right there, but he never said them. He always yelled something like, You died 2 times, you died 3 times, you died 4 times. What a god! He had even counted how many times the little shrimps had died. That was too improper. Everyone could only silently curse in their hearts. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 392 Chapter 392 What's so good about Excellent Era? A peaceful night passed. The nervousness that was felt from that day had calmed down. When the light came out and it was time for everyone to rest, the guild leaders suddenly received a message from Lord Grimm. Don't forget tomorrow's materials. What? All of the guild leaders were taken by surprise. The wind whistled and roared and their hands trembled. They were unsure about how to reply. Another message soon followed. I'm just joking. FCK. Some of them accidentally typed it into the global chat. Those who didn't know about the situation didn't know the reason for the curse. Of course, those who knew about the situation knew who the curse was supposed to have been sent to. Everyone logged off and their substitutes came on. On Ye Xiu's side, Chen Guo had been with him the entire time, enjoying the show and had even slept even later than Sima Cheng did. When daylight came, she still hadn't gotten up yet. Tang Ru still had to go to work later that day, so she didn't delay and logged off in order to rest. Ye Xiu leveled by himself for a while, up until Chen Guo woke up. In accordance with what they had discussed last night, Chen Guo took over his character to continue leveling. "I'm telling you again, if I don't want to play then I'll stop," Chen Guo emphasized. "Yeah, I know. I pretty much haven't done any of the quests yet, so you can do the quests while leveling," Ye Xiu said. "Okay." Chen Guo nodded her head and started her work as a substitute leveler. As someone who was straightforward with what she said, the reason Chen Guo stressed her words was because she had played Glory for many years. She had experienced practically everything in the game, so it was very easy to get tired and bored of playing by herself. Apart from special events, there were very few people who could patiently level the entire day like Ye Xiu and Tang Ru could. Chen Guo felt like she would stop playing after 2 or 3 hours, which was a testimony to how well she understood herself. Whether it was doing quests or killing monsters, nothing was new to her. Sure enough, she quickly got bored. The only thing that allowed her to hang on for so long was because of the 1,000-chance umbrella. "I'll stop once I finish this quest." Chen Guo carried this type of mentality with her and continued, all the way until Ye Xiu got up. Chen Guo was still busy running about doing a quest. She had no idea how many times she had said to herself, "This is the last one. Once I finish this, I'm done." "Not bad, you level very quickly. You really deserve to be called a veteran at the game," Ye Xiu said. However, Chen Guo had her headphones on and was too focused on killing monsters to hear him. "Boss, it's time to get off work." Ye Xiu could only get closer and yell in her ear. "Ah!" Chen Guo leaped up in surprise. She turned her head and saw Ye Xiu behind her. With a look of astonishment, she looked at the time. It was almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon already. "Didn't you say you'd stop playing once you got tired? You had that much energy." Ye Xiu saw the experience bar and knew that Chen Guo pretty much hadn't rested. If not, she couldn't have gained so much experience. "Ah, yeah," Chen Guo said. "You're still not tired. If you're not tired, you can continue," Ye Xiu said. "It's yours." Chen Guo got up. She was quite surprised when she left. When did so much time pass? She had gotten bored quite a while ago. What had allowed her to continue playing for so long? Chen Guo walked around in a circle. In the end, she came back to see what Ye Xiu was doing. Ye Xiu was just continuing to level, killing the monsters that she hadn't killed and doing the quests she hadn't completed. It was nothing out of the ordinary. There was nothing to say. Even so, Chen Guo still stood there stupidly for a long time. She discovered that her current situation was, leveling was boring, but not leveling was even more boring. Her interest in Glory seemed to have entirely gone into the 10th server, into the 10th server's guild Happy, and into Lord Grimm, an important member of their future team. Unspecialized. Chen Guo scratched her head. If Lord Grimm really did appear in the Pro Alliance, what a sight that would be. Against the famous Vacaria, Desert Dust, Troubling Rain, and even one Autumn Leaf, how would Lord Grimm fare against them? "Oh, you finished this quest." Ye Xiu suddenly interrupted Chen Guo from her daze. Chen Guo looked at the quest Ye Xiu was talking about and nodded her head in confirmation. "Yeah, I finished it." "Okay." Ye Xiu didn't say anything more and continued with his business. Chen Guo pulled a chair over to the side and sat there like a general giving out orders. Even though she knew that she was only displaying her slight skill in front of an expert, she was still full of enthusiasm, especially when Ye Xiu did as he was told. It was truly an amazing feeling of accomplishment. When dinner arrived, a different sort of excitement took over the internet cafe, and it became even louder than usual. This was because it was another pro match day. Happy Internet Cafe projected Team Excellent Era's match today like a movie theater. This had already become a big feature of Happy. Whenever this day came, there would always be more customers than usual. Those at a computer had to play. As long as one didn't block another's view, then anywhere else was fine to stand around at. Today, after dinner, Chen Guo directed the employees to begin setting everything up. The broadcast began a few minutes before the match began, and it was projected directly onto a screen. The host and the commentator were already chatting with each other. But once everyone heard the content, they felt like something wasn't quite right. The customers who were paying attention and watching the broadcast had already begun calling out, "Boss, what's going on?" Questions began being asked one after the other. "What do you mean, what's going on?" Chen Yu stood next to the projection screen with her hands at her waist. "Excellent Era. Today's TV broadcast isn't showing Excellent Era's match. Hurry and switch it to the online stream," someone shouted. The Glory Pro Alliance had a total of 20 teams. When match day came, 10 matches would be shown at the same time. The TV broadcast was limited. It would choose the most popular match, the match with a feature, or a match that had to be broadcast by contract. That was the best way to get ratings. For example, today, one of the matches was between Tiny Herb and Blue Rain. A match between Excellent Era and a weak team couldn't compare to this. If one wanted to watch Excellent Era's match, it could only be watched online. The online streams showed all 10 matches, so one could watch whichever match one liked. At Happy Internet Cafe, Chen Guo had always projected Excellent Era's matches, so the audience members were all loyal fans of Excellent Era. As long as there was an Excellent Era match, they wouldn't watch a match like the one between Tiny Herb and Blue Rain. But today, Happy Internet Cafe was projecting the TV broadcast, Tiny Herb vs. Blue Rain, not the one everyone wanted to watch. Of course, they would hurry and remind the boss. "Excellent Era is fighting Bright Green today. What's there to watch? Good matches can't be missed, so we're obviously going to watch Tiny Herb vs. Blue Rain," Chen Guo said loudly. The entire audience was completely astonished. They had come for this special event and were undoubtedly all frequent customers. How could they not know that the beautiful boss of Happy was a loyal fan of Excellent Era? There were also rumors that she often fangirled over Suma Cheng. In private, it was quite a topic for discussion. But today, the extremely loyal fan actually said that there was nothing to watch in Excellent Era's match. Did some sort of devil curse her? After a moment of astonishment, someone finally yelled out, "Boss, don't joke with us. Hurry up and switch the match. It's about to start." "Yeah, yeah." A bunch of shouts sounded out. Many of them thought that Chen Guo was only joking. There was no way they were going to miss Excellent Era's match. "Who's joking? Today we're showing Tiny Herb vs. Blue Rain." Chen Guo's voice held no doubts, making them feel that she really wasn't joking. Excellent Era, we want Excellent Era." Quite a few audience members protested intensely, shouting and yelling, whistling and booing, throwing around stuff. But Chen Guo didn't cower back. She rushed towards the projection screen and jumped onto a chair. "We're watching Tiny Herb vs. Blue Rain. If you want to watch Excellent Era, go back home." The fans were clearly more loyal to Excellent Era than the Internet Cafe. Seeing that today, the boss really wasn't going to show Excellent Era's match, they became furious. Quite a few clamored, "I'm never coming back." After a few more shouts, the majority of the audience left. Some had even trashed the place, throwing mice and smashing keyboards, breaking all sorts of things. Chen Guo saw this, but she couldn't do anything to stop them. She didn't say anything as she sent them off. The remaining customers, besides those who weren't watching the match, were more mature. They wouldn't be so angry over something like this. The match wasn't going anywhere. If they wanted to watch Excellent Era, then they could just look up the match on the computers and watch. No. On the projection screens, the two powerhouses had already begun fighting. The Internet Cafe had turned cold and cheerless in a mess. Keyboards and mouses were on the ground. There were countless broken ones, too. Some of the monitors had been smashed. Luckily, the computers were locked inside the table, otherwise they would have been destroyed as well. The employees in the internet cafe quietly cleaned up. They were thinking that with the boss's temper, she might collapse from anger and were too scared to call out to her. Ye Xiu got up from where he had been playing and walked to directly in front of the projection screen. He grabbed a chair and sat down in a comfortable position. His mouth moved. "You're very right. There's nothing good about Excellent Era's match today. Of course, you have to watch Tiny Herb versus Blue Rain. They don't know what it means to appreciate a good match. The ma'am over there, could you move to the side? You're blocking the screen." "Huh?" Still standing on the chair, Chen Guo unexpectedly laughed. After jumping down, she pulled over her chair and sat down next to Ye Xiu without even wiping her chair. "Cough." Ye Xiu suddenly coughed. "What is it? Do you need to smoke?" Chen Guo narrowed her eyes. "No, don't you think that we're sitting a bit too close?" Chen Guo raised her head and looked up at the gigantic projection screen. She nodded her head. "A bit. Let's hurry up and get farther away in case they feature Wang Jixi. If not, his two disproportionate eyes will scare us to death." Ye Xiu said the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 393 Chapter 393 Absent-minded, do you count that as a personal attack? Chen Guo wanted to laugh, but she had to warn Ye Xiu seriously too. "No way, I'm just saying the truth. If you don't believe me, you can stay there," Ye Xiu said as he moved his chair far away. Chen Guo hesitated for a moment. With the way Ye Xiu said it, she felt like he was right and hastily lifted her chair and chased after him. By the time the two had found their new sitting positions, the individual matches were nearly over. The Blue Rain player beautifully comboed a Tiny Herb player to death, winning the victory for his team. "Nice." When Chen Guo sat down, she saw the result and began shouting. "Which side are you rooting for?" Ye Xiu couldn't help but ask. "Doesn't matter, Chen Guo." "Then why are you shouting so much?" "If they play well, then I cheer for them," Chen Guo explained calmly. The internet cafe was empty. Let alone match days, even normal days never had so few customers at peak hours. In the messy space, they were the only two people looking at the big projection screen. "If you're not rooting for anyone, the match is kind of boring to watch," Ye Xiu said. "Then which side are you rooting for?" Chen Guo asked. "Me. I'm a pro, so I look at the match with a studying eye. Look, these guys will be our future opponents." Ye Xiu pointed to the two pro players who had just finished their match. Chen Guo's spirit rose when she heard this, especially when Ye Xiu said "our." It made Chen Guo feel like she had taken a step into the glory pro scene. The second match began. In the entire happy internet cafe, there were still the only two people paying attention to the projection. The others who were watching the competition stayed at their computers, quietly watching Excellent Era's match. In truth, how could Chen Guo feel calm, seeing Happy Internet Cafe in such a state? Happy Internet Cafe had always appealed to Excellent Era fans because of its proximity to the club. Moreover, Chen Guo also happened to be a loyal fan of Excellent Era, so she was able to easily make the business into a gathering place for them. Her actions today had undoubtedly offended many loyal Excellent Era fans and had hurt her own brand. Chen Guo was worried about the road ahead. However, she wasn't the type of person to swallow her anger. Excellent Era had already turned into an enemy to her, and she wasn't willing to specially serve these Excellent Era fans. Her actions had been impulsive today, but if she had another chance, Chen Guo was sure that she would do the same. She was worried, but she couldn't let others see it, so she tried her best to show that she didn't care. Ye Xiu, on the other hand, truly seemed like he didn't care at all. Amidst the mess, he watched the match as if nothing had happened. "Beautiful," Ye Xiu suddenly shouted, almost scaring Chen Guo off her seat. She was pretending to enjoy the match and didn't want to show any weaknesses, so she immediately added, Yeah, beautiful." Her focus returned to the match. This time, Tiny Herb's player clearly held the advantage. Chen Guo had no idea why Ye Xiu had shouted beautiful, and she couldn't ask him either. Controlling her temper, she watched as Tiny Herb's player dominated his opponent. When the highlight montage was shown, Chen Guo's question was answered. Tiny Herb's player had been losing, but was able to punish a mistake to turn the situation around, making even a god like Ye Xiu praise him. In the third round, Chen Guo felt that it would be too embarrassing to get distracted again. But this time, when she watched, she accidentally glanced at Ye Xiu and discovered that Ye Xiu was the one to get distracted. He wasn't watching the projection screen. His gaze was on one of the customer's computer screens. This customer was watching Excellent Era's match. Chen Guo glanced at it and noticed that the one fighting on Excellent Era's side was Sima Cheng. The two people sitting right in front of the projection screen both turned their heads and squinted their eyes to see the Excellent Era match, naturally because they cared about whether Sima Cheng won or lost. In the end, Sima Cheng won the match beautifully. Excellent Era's opponent, Bright Green, was truly a low-tier team. Their goal was to stay in the alliance. The players in the team weren't that good and their accounts were relatively weak. Even on paper, the difference between them and an all-star like Sima Cheng was too great. Sima Cheng's performance was very steady and she won with relative ease. At that instant, the two spectators immediately turned back after seeing Sima Cheng's match. Both of them sensed what had happened. Cough. The two people lightly coughed. Just as one of them was about to say something, one of the internet cafe employees was deceived by boss Chen Guo's act and felt like the boss was abnormally calm today. The internet cafe had almost been ripped apart, but she didn't seem angry at all. As a result, the employee bravely went forward and reported their clean-up progress. Got it. You can throw them away if they're broken. I'll have someone replace them tomorrow. Chen Guo calmly said after hearing how many items had been broken and continued to pretend as if nothing had happened. Without discarding the old, there would be no coming of the new, Ye Xiu recited. Are you trying to console me? Chen Guo asked. No, I'm just saying a fact, Ye Xiu said. At this moment, the individual competition between Tiny Herb and Blue Rain ended. Tiny Herb won 2 matches, gaining 2 points. Blue River won 1 match, gaining 1 point. Chen Guo had been too preoccupied with her thoughts to pay attention to the 3 matches and didn't have any impression of them in her head. After a short break, the group arena competition began. The commentator and honored guest began to get excited. They took out the players' list for the competition and saw an extra name on Team Tiny Herb's side, Gao Yingji. If I remember correctly, before the All-Star weekend, Gao Yingji has never gone up on stage in an official match, right? The commentator asked. Correct, though I'm sure everyone still remembers Gao Yingji's brilliant performance at the All-Star Rookie Challenge. It seems like his performance has finally won him a place for himself on Team Tiny Herb. The honored guest took the chance to start up a discussion. We just don't know whether or not Gao Yingji will appear in the final team competition. We don't have the players' list for the team competition yet, the commentator said. If he can show the type of performance that he did during the All-Star weekend, I feel like he'll definitely be able to grab a spot on the main roster in the team competition. Tiny Herb has raised an amazing rookie. They really have. There's no one in the alliance at his age that can fight evenly with a top-tier god like Wang Jixi. And he even won. A single victory isn't enough to say whether Gao Yingji is better than Wang Jixi. For someone to have such skill at his age, has there ever been a player like this in the alliance? The honored guest clearly hadn't done his homework in this area. He couldn't fill in this hole and could only evade the question embarrassingly. Luckily, the match had started and the commentator quickly switched topics and began to commentate the match. Gao Yingji, is this kid really that good? Chen Guo asked Ye Xiu. He's quite amazing, Ye Xiu said. If he fights with you, Chen Guo asked. Ha ha. Ye Xiu laughed but didn't say anything. Tell me, Chen Guo chased. I have to see him in actual combat. It's hard to say, Ye Xiu said. So you're saying even you aren't completely confident? Chen Guo asked. In the pro scene there's no one who is absolutely confident, Ye Xiu said. Oh, I usually say I'm 90% sure. I have to give myself some leeway, Ye Xiu added. Chen Guo had no words to say. When the match started, it showed that Gao Yingji really had gained confidence from his match in the All-Star weekend. In this match, he performed outstandingly. However, Gao Yingji's amazing performance didn't win any big advantage because his opponent wasn't weak either. Team Blue Rain's Yu Feng was an all-star level player. Gao Yingji was still too green compared to him. In addition, the two sides had an absolute disparity on paper, their characters. Yu Feng's berserker, brilliant edge, might not be a god-level account, but it wasn't far. In comparison, Gao Yingji's witch, kind tree, was very far below being a god-tier character. Gao Yingji was being raised by Tiny Herb as the one to inherit Vacaria. Vacaria would be his character in the future. Team Tiny Herb didn't have any double witch strategies, so the club didn't spend much effort on Gao Yingji's kind tree. It could be said that they had made the account in passing while raising Gao Yingji. This type of character couldn't compare to an All-Stars account. It was true that Gao Yingji's brilliant performance in the All-Star weekend had won him confidence, but it had also made every team be cautious towards him. No one would underestimate him because he was an inexperienced rookie. Yu Feng had this attitude. It could be said that the reason why Gao Yingji looked more dominant was because of his outstanding performance. However, it would be better to say that it was because Yu Feng was letting him attack in order to get a better feel for him. After all, as a rookie that had never been in an official match, the teams only had very limited intelligence on him. At the All-Star weekend, they were able to see his skill. But what was his style like? What habits did he have? What type of skills did he like to use? These types of intelligence could only be slowly gathered. Without a good understanding of his opponent, Yu Feng's attitude in the match wasn't odd. Young people, as soon as they break free from their chains, they really are reckless in pushing forward. Ye Xiu watched the match and sighed. He understood Wang Jixi's motive at the All-Star Weekend. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 394 Chapter 394 Cross Swords, who are you talking about? Chen Guo didn't understand. In esports, the pro players were all extremely young, so any of them could be considered as a young person, even for those old pros who were going to retire like Ye Xiu. Ye Xiu was showing off his seniority calling them young people, but Chen Guo really couldn't tell if he was talking about Gao Yingji or Yu Feng. She even though that he was talking more about Yu Feng. In Chen Guo's eyes, Gao Yingji was too young to even be considered as a young person. I'm talking about this future of glory. Ye Xiu was still acting like he was talking to himself. What are you talking about? Chen Guo muttered to herself. This Yu Feng is playing more and more with substance. Ye Xiu said again. He was never bad, Chen Guo said. She had some understanding of Yu Feng. He was an all-star level player and was considered as one of the top players in the pro scene. For famous players, even if she wasn't a fan of them, she would still know some information about them from their popularity and reports. He wasn't in the All-Star weekend last year, was he? He improved a lot this year, Ye Xiu said. Oh, really? Chen Guo recalled. Last year's All-Star players, she couldn't remember them. In my opinion, Blue Rain's environment for growth is the best among all teams, Ye Xiu said. What about Tiny Herb? Chen Guo couldn't help but ask. After all, Tiny Herb had raised Gao Yingji, a talent that was unrivaled in his age group. Tiny Herb, perhaps because of their champion status, the requirements for their rookies might be too harsh. Ye Xiu sighed. He thought of Kaio Yifen. Kaio Yifen might not shine as brightly as Gao Yingji, but he was also an unpolished gem. If he was carved carefully, he could also mature. Tiny Herb must have seen something in him when they took him in. but they didn't raise him with care. It was truly a pity. Even though the players list for this match hadn't been completely revealed, with Kyle Yifan's performance in the All-Star Weekend, Ye Xiu doubted that he would be able to grab a spot in the main roster like Gao Yingji. During their discussion, the circumstance in the match had changed. Yu Feng, who was letting his opponent attack, finally found an opportunity to counterattack. His single move turned the tide and he began attacking relentlessly. The sudden suppression made Gao Yingji panic and he lost his cool. After all, this was only his first official match. Even though the rookie challenge at the All-Star Weekend had helped him win much confidence, the circumstances right now were different. The pressure and burden of an official match far surpassed a match that was just for show. Any new player would feel stifled in this situation. If everything went well, they might be able to perform well the entire time. But as soon as a bump in the road appeared, they might not be able to perform under the pressure. Gao Yingji's luck wasn't good either. He had to face an all-star player in his first match. From an experience and character point of view, he was at a disadvantage. Under a dominant performance, the opponent suddenly reversed the situation. It was hard to avoid having his mentality crumble. Whether or not his newfound confidence could help him hang on was up to him. Tiny Herb isn't look too good, no. Chen Gu saw it. If he doesn't take any risks, he won't be able to bring it back. Ye Xiu sighed. From what he saw, Gao Yingji had already missed 3 opportunities he could have tried. Even though the opportunities weren't 100% guarantees, they were at least a chance for him to break out from the predicament. Another one, Ye Xiu silently thought. This time, Gao Yingji acted. Seizing the moment Yu Feng's character turned around, he used an extremely low and short-distance flying movement to enter Yu Feng's dead angle. Yu Feng woke up with a start and hastily turned around to attack, but Gao Yingji was one step faster. Quan Zhi swung his broom, sweeping Yu Feng into the air. It was a risky move and couldn't really be considered as an opportunity. This was a contest between reaction and hand speed. In this instant, Gao Yingji displayed his confidence and took back the initiative in one move. Not bad, Ye Xiu praised with a smile. And at this moment, the person who was much more nervous and excited was obviously Tiny Herb's Captain Wang Jixi. He understood Gao Yingji better and understood the importance of this tiny detail. If he had failed to seize that opportunity, it would have been a huge blow to Gao Yingji's confidence. If he succeeded, it would certainly strengthen his confidence. Even if Gao Yingji lost later, it wouldn't matter. At the very least, he would know that he was good enough to have a chance at winning. He would know that he had such skill. Gao Yingji's following performance made Wang Jixi even more excited. His torrent like a fence made him look utterly fearless. Gao Yingji was clearly doing his utmost to finish the match. Wang Jixi obviously wanted to see this type of result. But unfortunately, Gao Yingji's opponent showed why he was an all-star. Taking advantage of the fact that a berserker had higher endurance than a witch, and that his character was superior to Quan Zhi, he relied on patiently whittling down Quan Zhi in order to defeat Gao Yingji. Wang Jixi was still satisfied with the result because he was certain that Gao Yingji could also see that he hadn't lost in skill, but rather because of the difference in character accounts. If Gao Yingji had used Vacaria, the result may have been different. This reasoning wasn't anything complex. The commentator and honored guest pointed this out while they were talking about the results. After a short break, the second round began. Yu Feng had relied on his character's superiority to slowly whittle down his opponent, so he had taken significant damage. Not long after the second match started, he was quickly taken down. Blue Rain's second player fully utilized the small advantage that Yu Feng had been able to set up and defeated his opponent. The third round. Tiny Herb's pillar, team captain Wang Jixi took the stage. With his god-level character and skill, he finished off the second Blue Rain opponent without taking much damage. But Blue Rain's third player to take the stage was also their team's ace, Huang Xiaoshan. This sort of match between god-level players was a common occurrence in the group arena. The two teams' strongest players would be their anchor. This type of arrangement was considered an obvious arrangement. This was also the round everyone was looking forward to. The commentator and honored guest hyped up the match. The wait for the third round seemed to be longer than any of the previous rounds. Start. The two sides hadn't even touched each other yet when a storm of messages attacks. They were only hurrying forward to get to each other. How could Huang Xiaoshan be capable of staying silent? It didn't matter if he was repeating himself as long as they were words. However, trash talk didn't work on everyone. Wang Jixi was clearly one of those players who wasn't affected by trash talk. He ignored Huang Xiaoshan's messaging attacks and quietly had his Valkyria quickly fly to his opponent's position. Huang Xiaoshan, on the other hand, seemed to have gotten addicted to chatting and didn't hurry to face his opponent. His character had made his way into a side alley. By the time Wang Jixi found him, it had already been nearly 3 minutes. But once this moment came, the messages abruptly stopped and sword light filled the sky. Wang Jixi had been on the initiative the entire time, but once the two characters met, Huang Xiaoshan was the first to move. Moreover, he began with the Blade Master's most powerful skill, Formless Phantom Blade. There hadn't been any setup for this skill, but having no setup was actually a perfect cover-up. Wang Jixi clearly hadn't expected it. At the start, Huang Xiaoshan had been hiding like a cat and seemed to be very patiently waiting. But then he suddenly made such a reckless move. This powerful skill truly caught Wang Jixi completely unprepared. It hadn't been easy to find Troubling Rain, so when his Valkyria found him, he dove straight down, but was then hit by a gale of sword light. Surprised, Wang Jixi reflexively responded. Valkyria, which had been diving down, suddenly shot up and turned around in order to try fly away from the danger. However, Troubling Rain's sword light abruptly rose and followed after Valkyria, preventing him from completely escaping. As soon as the sword light touched, Valkyria was chopped down from the sky and engulfed by the dazzling sword lights. Wang Jixi had taken a huge blow from Huang Xiaoshan's move. Not bad. Ye Xiu nodded his head. Hey, hey, hey. Chen Guo felt a bit unhappy with Ye Xiu's tone. Even though Ye Xiu was his favorite god, Huang Xiaoshan and Wang Jixi weren't any weaker than him. He was commenting on these same leveled gods like they were noobs. Chen Guo felt annoyed when she heard it. Hey who? Ye Xiu didn't feel it at all. You. Chen Guo said you a bunch of times but didn't know how to express what she wanted to say. In the end, she changed it to, what do you think? It's only just started. As soon as Ye Xiu finished speaking, the Formless Phantom Blade stopped. The final hit had a strong blow-away effect, knocking Valkyria into a wall. Valkyria was briefly stunned from being knocked into a wall. Troubling Rain was briefly stunned by the ending lag from his powerful skill. Huang Xiaoshan had already calculated these two stun durations. After his stun wore off, his Troubling Rain used a triple slash to quickly close in onto Valkyria. If he really was able to reach Valkyria before the stun was over, then that would be best. But in this type of situation, there was no possibility of it happening. Huang Xiaoshan had done everything he could, but even so, there was a small gap. Wang Jixi wasn't the type of person to let this go. As soon as the stun wore off, Valkyria rode his broom and rushed straight into the air. But then he heard the sound of a blade whistling through the air. Huang Xiaoshan had forcefully cancelled his triple slash and used a rising dragon slash mid-animation. Wang Jixi's retreat had been predicted by Him the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 395 Chapter 395. A dangerous balance in a high skill-leveled fight. Only looking at mechanics and hand speed wasn't enough to fully appreciate it. In the match with Huang Xiaoshan against Wang Jixi, the two reads made it look like Wang Jixi was already going to lose. Rising Dragon Slash split the air as it rose towards Wang Jixi's retreat path. But this time, Wang Jixi reacted in time as if he had expected this would happen. Vacaria leapt off his broom and switched directions. He didn't fly out and instead waved his broom twice. The stream of air created by the two waves made Vacaria move a tiny bit. This minuscule movement was enough to cause Troubling Rain's Rising Dragon Slash to miss, brushing past Vacaria's side and into the air. Huang Xiaoshan knew that the situation wasn't good. It seemed like he could see Wang Jixi's two disproportionate eyes flashing out a calculating glint despite Vacaria's expressionless system face. This time, he had been caught in Wang Jixi's trap. Two crashes sounded in the air and on the ground. Two magic flasks had been shattered one after the other. Acid rained down from the sky and lava burned on the ground. Vacaria turned his broom around and headed towards Troubling Rain with the witch skill, Broom Tornado. Huang Xiaoshan didn't want to take a hit. However, Wang Jixi had already calculated all of his possible moves. The two flasks had been thrown down very quickly. That small window of time wasn't enough for Huang Xiaoshan to do anything when the Broom Tornado flew forward. The huge area of effect magic storm spread out as Wang Jixi spun. This skill covered an extremely wide area. Even though Huang Xiaoshan wanted to quickly use a falling light blade in order to get to the ground, but just like how Wang Jixi had tried to escape from his formless phantom blade before, Huang Xiaoshan was swept away. Vacaria's broom slapped him around like a tornado all the way from the air to the ground. The combined damage from the three skills to Huang Xiaoshan's Troubling Rain was greater than the damage from the single powerful skill to Vacaria. Even worse, Wang Jixi had the initiative. Being slapped to the ground wasn't the end. Huang Xiaoshan didn't have any problems using Quick Recover. The instant his character hit the ground, his character rolled backwards and then jumped away. Vacaria had to Quick Recover as well when he hit the ground after using Broom Tornado. If not, he would also crash to the ground. Even though there wouldn't be any fall damage, being knocked to the ground would be a huge opportunity for the opponent. Wang Jixi rarely made mistakes for something as basic as this. His character also rolled backwards and jumped away. The two characters' movements looked like they had been rehearsed beforehand. Following afterwards, a sword light flashed from Troubling Rain, while a black mist rolled out from Vacaria. During the jump backwards, the two players each executed a skill, a sword draw and a shadow cloak. But because the two chose to roll and jump in opposite directions, they instantly pulled away from each other. The two skills both missed. Neither side was injured. With the distance between them, the Blade Master didn't have anything he could use, but the witch had a few ways to attack from mid-range. Immediately, magic missiles began shooting towards Troubling Rain. Huang Xiaoshan couldn't do anything to retaliate, so he straight up used a big skill. Troubling Rain's silhouette flickered, instantly creating 6 images. He had used the high-leveled skill, Shadow Steps. This skill relied on the controller's experience and technique. Huang Xiaoshan was considered to be at the top of Blade Masters. When this skill came out, even Wang Jixi couldn't tell which was the real body. If not, then the skill would be completely useless. 6 Troubling Rains rushed forward. Wang Jixi had no way of directly distinguishing the real from the fake, so he could only test them with attacks. However, Shadow Steps was much stronger than the ninja's Shadow Clone technique. The ninja's Shadow Clone was only a clone that didn't move and also only had limited health, so a few attacks was enough to make it disappear. Shadow Steps was different. The afterimages created didn't have health and couldn't be destroyed. However, because they were afterimages, if an attack connected, the attack would go right through the afterimage. By testing each afterimage one by one, the real one could be found. Wang Jixi quickly threw out a few mid-ranged magic missiles and immediately figured out two afterimages. However, Huang Xiaoshan wouldn't be found out so easily. The six characters shifted positions with each other in a blur. The commentator and honored guest gasped in amazement. With such complex movements, it was hard to say if Wang Jixi could locate which of the two afterimages he had tested out. Indeed, Wang Jixi had no way of following the two targets he had tested out with such movements. But he had known that Huang Xiaoshan could do this, so from the very beginning, he had only tried to follow one of the two afterimages he had tested out. This was something that he was capable of doing. Next, he did another wave of tests, naturally avoiding that afterimage and only attacking the others. It had to be known that Huang Xiaoshan wasn't going to simply get hit by Wang Jixi's attacks. He was also constantly dodging. In the end, only one of the magic missiles hit, and it hit an afterimage. Wang Jixi knew that it wasn't possible to find the real one by testing. An attack towards the real one would definitely be dodged. Huang Xiaoshan wasn't stupid. The two waves of testing had only figured out two afterimages. During this time, the six troubling rains were able to envelop Vacaria. The six characters maintained a distance away and spun around Vacaria. Which one's the real body? Chen Guo couldn't tell and asked Ye Xiu. I don't know either. Ye Xiu shook his head. Huang Xiaoshan's mastery of shadow steps was already at the peak. However, shadow steps couldn't be used forever. It was only a skill to confuse the opponent. In a match, a victory could only be obtained by killing the opponent. The instant the afterimages faded away, a mass of sword light gathered together. Even though Wang Jixi had been extremely careful, he was still hit by the attack. If the attack had missed, then Huang Xiaoshan's efforts in using shadow steps would have been for nothing. Who do you think will win? Chen Guo was impatient. She liked to know the result beforehand. Ye Xiu slowly shook his head without saying anything. Chen Guo was helpless. She could only continue watching the match. This match between two gods was truly spectacular. Finally, those internet cafe customers who had originally been watching Excellent Era's match couldn't help but take a glance at the projection screen from time to time. In the end, everyone became traders, and they all began to watch who would win this match. None of the two gods were able to pull a big advantage over the other. The two sides fluctuated between who was on the offensive and who was on the defensive, two evenly matched adversaries. The health bar on the two characters also dropped very equally. It was impossible to tell who would win until the very last moment. Wang Jixi has a slightly higher chance of winning. Ye Xiu suddenly made a prediction. Why? Chen Guo hastily asked. Wang Jixi is good at these types of even matchups. Huang Xiaoshan is good at chaotic fights. The more chaotic the fight, the easier it is for him to find opportunities. However, this match is certainly intense, but it isn't chaotic at all. You come, I go. The one on the offense and the one on the defense keep switching. It's all very orderly. In other words, if things keep going on like this, Huang Xiaoshan isn't going to be able to seize an opportunity to win. If the fight continued at this even pace, in the end Wang Jixi will make the final attack. Ye Xiu said. Really? Chen Guo liked to ask, but after asking she wasn't so sure. Just watch, Ye Xiu said. As a result, Chen Guo began to count. This time Huang Xiaoshan was attacking. Next, Wang Jixi was attacking. Then, she continued to count all the way until the match was about to end. The two sides were both in red blood. Chen Guo had counted all day and had a bit of experience now. Seeing the situation, she gasped in astonishment. It looks like it really is going to go like how you said. Ye Xiu stayed silent, staring at the match. Huang Xiaoshan doesn't have any hope, Chen Guo asked. She felt a bit disappointing for things to steadily go like this. There is. Ye Xiu only said two words. What is it? Chen Guo asked. Watch. Ye Xiu pointed at the screen with his head, indicating Chen Guo to watch. Chen Guo had been counting the entire time. Now that she looked at the scene, she immediately realized that something wasn't right. It's not right. It should be Huang Xiaoshen's chance to attack. Why is it? After muttering for a bit, she suddenly realized something and immediately exclaimed, "Right. He purposefully gave the chance to attack to Wang Jixi. This way, he'll be the last person to attack." Chen Guo's excitement had only lasted 3 seconds because she already saw Ye Xiu looking down on her. After thinking again, she suddenly understood. The two sides only have a certain amount of health. Letting one chance go means that it won't progress in the same way as before. If they go back and forth, Huang Xiaoshen will still be the first to die because he'll have lost more health. Huang Xiaoshen only wants to break the even situation, so he intentionally put himself at the disadvantage. Ye Xiu finally explained. Putting himself at a disadvantage is an opportunity. Compared to continuing on like that, it's at least a chance. Of course, it's not a good chance. I still believe that Wang Jixi will see through Huang Xiaoshen's intent. To be able to direct such a scenario, I think that he has some way of controlling it so that Huang Xiaoshen won't be able to find a way to kill him in one move. Ye Xiu said. If Wang Jixi wins, then Tiny Herb will have 4 points and Blue Rain will only have 1. Chen Guo calculated the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 396, Chapter 396, Winner Glory. A single giant word appeared on the projection screen as if it were about to pounce towards everyone's faces. It wasn't just Ye Xiu and Chen Guo. The players who had been watching Excellent Era's match all let out a breath because this intense match had finally ended. For this type of match, even if the spectators didn't care about any of the teams, they would still feel extremely satisfied watching such a spectacle. All of the spectators watching the match forgot to turn back, seeming to have forgotten that Excellent Era's match was still going on. "It really is like you said," Chen Guo told Ye Xiu as she watched the match's replay and listened to the commentators and honored guests' post-match discussion. Ye Xiu nodded his head and didn't say anything more. He had said everything he could say earlier. At the final stretch of the match, Huang Xiaoshen intentionally gave up his chance to attack in order to break the balance, but Wang Jixi was able to seize this chance to end the match without giving Huang Xiaoshen any chance to find an opening. There was nothing Huang Xiaoshen could do. He could only struggle and try to create an opportunity, where there were no opportunities. However, this really wasn't one of his strengths, especially when he was against Wang Jixi, who wasn't any less skilled than he was. In the end, he was defeated. So far, Team Tiny Herb had won 4 points, while Blue Rain had only won 1 point. The team competition, though, was worth 5 points. The competition only counted points, not victories. Even though Blue Rain had only won 1 pitiful point so far, the team competition was another beginning. 5 points could still be fought for. However, several defeats in a row would definitely have a serious impact to their morale. Blue Rain's fans watched on with heavy hearts. The break after the group arena was relatively long. After all, the players participating in the team competition were usually the 6 players in the individual and group arena competitions. They were allowed to play again, so they were given some more time to rest. Ye Xiu got up and strolled around, smoking his cigarette. Only then did Chen Guo look for her employees to confirm their losses tonight. When the two returned, the host and the guest were still chattering about the previous battle between Huang Xiaoshen and Wang Jixi. But after hearing Ye Xiu's simple analysis, Chen Guo could only feel like the two speakers weren't good enough. They kept on talking about this and that, but they didn't get to the point. After a short wait, the team competition officially began. Because of the brilliance of the match, when the team competition began, the players watching Excellent Era's match were beginning to glance at the projection screen again, conflicted on which match to watch. Just as expected, there weren't any major changes towards the player roster for the two teams. It was basically the same players from the previous rounds. The only difference was that one of the players on Blue Rain's side was switched out to the team captain, Ye Xiu. This switch was a common occurrence for Blue Rain. Ye Xiu's hand speed was innately bad. If he actually fought one-on-one, he would be at a huge disadvantage, so Ye Xiu rarely went up on stage for the first 2 rounds. But in the team competition, this master tactician was never absent. Not only that, ever since his first showing, he was often the opposing team's first target to kill, commendable yet worrying at the same time. The match soon began. Besides the 2 reserve players, 10 players entered the map and set out. Looking at Ye Xiu, who was staring at the projection attentively, Quan Zhi Gao endured for a good while before asking, "How is it? Boss, with you like this, what's the point in watching? You should go to sleep. When it's done, I'll tell you the results." Ye Xiu said helplessly, "No, I just want to listen to your opinion." "I can't do that," Quan Zhi Gao said. "If you keep on asking for my opinion, then this will turn into a spoiler," Ye Xiu said. Even though Ye Xiu had seen through the situation and predicted the result on more than one occasion, saying that his analysis was like a spoiler was too shameless. Quan Zhi Gao didn't know how to respond. The golden image of her god crumbled a bit more. Quan Zhi Gao felt that if she and Ye Xiu continued with this sort of close relationship, in at most a month, her respect for her god would completely disappear without a trace. "Let's watch quietly. It started," Ye Xiu said. The brilliance of the team competition wasn't any worse than the match between the 2 gods. It was true that Ye Xiu was one of the 4 master tacticians of glory, but if the number of master tacticians wasn't limited to 4, the 5th master tactician would certainly be Wang Jixi. From this, it could be seen that although Wang Jixi didn't have this type of title, he had the skill. Leading Tiny Herb to win 2 championships wasn't an accident. This team competition had both strategy and skill matchups, sneak attacks and brute force. The map was enveloped in flames of war with hundreds of bright patterns bursting out. Not long after the fight had progressed midway, the camera repeatedly switched points of view. The broadcast crew didn't have it easy either. There were too many brilliant moments to see. Giving up even a single segment made them feel it was a pity. Wang Jixi is carrying too much of the weight, Ye Xiu suddenly said at this moment. Quan Zhi Gao replied absent-mindedly. She watched this team competition very attentively and had even forgotten to ask about his opinions. "It's not looking good for Tiny Herb," Ye Xiu said. "No way you saw through it again." Ye Xiu wouldn't say it when she asked. Now that she didn't ask, Ye Xiu ran over to become a talk host. "Wang Jixi truly needs someone who can help share the burden," Ye Xiu said. "Really? What about Deng Fasheng, Ye Xiu?" These 2 Team Tiny Herb players had been chosen as all-stars. Whether you believe me or not, if they weren't in Tiny Herb, they probably wouldn't have been chosen to go to all-stars, Ye Xiu said. "You're saying the all-star selection isn't on skill but rather popularity. The fans make the vote. Even though they need to have good performances too, there are other areas to consider too. For example, in a weak team, it's easier to see an individual skill. But in a strong team, the team's outstanding performance might cover up their weaknesses," Ye Xiu said. "You're saying Deng Fasheng and Ye Xiu belong in the latter category, and that it was only because of Team Tiny Herb's champion status that they were chosen," Quan Zhi Gao said. "I'm mainly saying this so you understand that being chosen for all stars doesn't necessarily mean you're the most skilled. For example, I feel like Team 301 Su Bin is better than Deng Fasheng's knight," Ye Xiu said. Grind King Su Bin. Quan Zhi Gao obviously knew who he was. "Yes," Ye Xiu nodded his head. "If Tiny Herb doesn't have Wang Jixi, or if Wang Jixi performs badly, they will lose miserably. They rely on Wang Jixi too much. Nowadays, glory can't be won by a single individual hero. The gap between players is continuously shrinking. 1 + 1 is greater than 2. That's the sort of strength a team has to have in order to be outstanding," Ye Xiu continued. Do you feel like any team in the alliance has that sort of strength? Chen Guo asked. Blue Rain. Ye Xiu said without hesitation. The team closest to this sort of development is definitely Blue Rain, but it's also somewhat unfortunate. Team Blue Rain's captain Yu Wenzhou is extremely key, but because of his crippled hands he also holds them back. I've heard. Chen Guo nodded his head. Yu Wenzhou's crippled hands, similar to Huang Xiaoshan's chatter, weren't a secret. But luckily his weakness is his crippled hands. He'll definitely be the longest player to stay in the alliance. In truth, with his hand speed, there's no way it'll go any lower. I'm really wondering whether this guy is intentionally not practicing hand speed in order to maintain his crippled hands condition and prolong his ability to stay in the pro scene. Ye Xiu said. The two chatted and the match didn't show any signs of stopping for a rest. As the battle progressed, it went like Ye Xiu predicted. One of Team Tiny Herb's players was the first to fall. In a team competition, this was definitely a dangerous sign. It became even more clear as the fight went on. By the time Tiny Herb had finally killed one of Blue Rain's players, Tiny Herb had already lost 3 versus 5. Against a strong team, turning around this type of situation was extremely difficult. In the end, Blue Rain defeated Tiny Herb, winning their team 5 points. The latecomer lives above. Blue Rain won a total of 6 points, beating Tiny Herb by 2 points. If a long-term problem isn't resolved, the opponents will take advantage of the weakness to win. Ye Xiu commented. He was naturally pointing towards Tiny Herb's weakness of depending on Wang Jixi too much. Meanwhile, the commentator and honored guest were discussing the gains and losses for the small details in the team competition. The accumulation of these led to Tiny Herb's eventual defeat. Out of all of these, they picked out which was the decider for the match. However, from start to finish, there was no mention of the issue Ye Xiu had talked about. Chen Guo listened in a trance. In truth, she had heard what Ye Xiu said, but she couldn't see it. On the other hand, she felt like the analysis of the commentator and honored guest had substance to them. Ye Xiu's words sounded far away to her. It seems like I'm just not good enough. Chen Guo grieved. If this was before, she would have questioned whether Ye Xiu was just bragging. But now that she knew Ye Xiu's identity, even though he was somewhat shameless, Chen Guo felt that his words felt more weight to them than the commentator or the honored guest. Okay, done. Ye Xiu stood up and waved his arms. Time to level. Before he finished speaking, he was already walking towards his fixed seat. Chen Guo felt conflicted when she looked at him walking away. He was someone who could completely see through those gods' intent and could even predict who was going to win. Yet he was stuck in her internet cafe in a new server killing monsters and doing quests like a normal player. What a waste. He has to make it back. Chen Guo turned her head back to the projection screen and shook her fist. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 397, Chapter 397. Words that hadn't been seen in a long time. Life in the game continued. Players continued to clear dungeons, kill monsters, and complete quests. After all, these are the 3 main parts of glory. Everything else is just to make these more interesting. These basic frames have never been changed. All of the guilds agreed to step down, but Ye Xiu didn't loosen his guard. Since the moment he established the guild, he knew that the other guild leaders would be his enemies forever. They were only temporarily stepping down. It was just that they hadn't found any ways to fight back yet. If they ever thought up a new scheme, a violent offensive would immediately be carried out, without any warning, of course. The best method of collecting information was to use someone condemned and hated by everyone, a spy. But Guild Happy had just been established. It wasn't that there wasn't anyone who could be trusted. Even if there were, they weren't high enough leveled to join any of these guilds backed by clubs. However, from this point, it could be seen that Guild Happy was actually very high-end. It had been established not too long ago, yet it was already considered as an opponent to those guilds backed by clubs. This had never happened before in the history of Glory, even in new servers. Guild Happy could only develop step by step because those sorts of methods wouldn't work. Blue River went back to his Blue Brook Guild leader account. Peerless Looks hadn't logged in since then. However, because Ye Xiu disabled the Join Guild feature, the number of members stopped increasing. The existing members had all been organized appropriately by Blue River. Everyone was simply grinding monsters to gain experience now. The guild atmosphere was happy and fun. No unexpected problems occurred. Compared to the first few days the guild was established, the excitement had fallen a bit. This could be seen from the guild experience bar. These days, the enthusiasm for doing guild quests had calmed down. It wasn't like the first few days, where guild missions were everything. It wouldn't be good for Happy to force them to do anything. Letting the guild grow peacefully was for the best. During these few days, Ye Xiu was keeping an eye on the situation at Thousand Waves Lake, and also asking other guild members on the situation at other leveling areas. The atmosphere in the game was unusually calm, as if all conflicts had disappeared from the game. In a blink of an eye, 5 days had passed and Thousand Creations and Horse Shooter successfully joined Guild Happy. Once midnight arrived, Guild Happy could begin challenging the Thousand Waves Lake dungeon record as well. During these 5 days, the Thousand Wave Lake's dungeon record had been broken a few times. Ye Xiu noticed these, but he was certain that as soon as he came up to the stage, beating them would be easy. It wasn't like the walkthrough he sold was imperfect. Ye Xiu would be using the same strategy as the guide. The difference was in technical skill. The higher the level, the harder the dungeon. The elite players of other guilds were experienced players, but level 40+ dungeons were already too difficult for 3 of their players to beat. In newbie areas like Green Forest and Spider Cave, 3 of their players was more than enough to beat the dungeon with ease. The more difficult the dungeon, the more Ye Xiu, Suma Cheng, and even Tang Ru would stand out. This could directly be seen by the fact that Ye Xiu's party still didn't need a cleric. While for the other dungeon teams, few dared to go without a cleric at this level stage. The closer things got to this moment, the more careful and cautious Ye Xiu became. The main reason the other guilds hated him was because of his ability to monopolize dungeon record. The other guilds must also know that Guild Happy was going to seize the dungeon record in Thousand Waves Lake. They might have had plans for this long ago, but were waiting for this moment to use. The clock finally hit midnight. Ye Xiu's 5-man party arrived at one of the Thousand Wave Lake's dungeon entrances. Ye Xiu checked carefully around but didn't find anyone from other guilds. In that case, he didn't have to worry about getting ambushed when they came out of the dungeon. Is it really going to be this peaceful? I'm not used to this. Ye Xiu scratched his head while saying this to his team. You aren't happy it's peaceful. Is it because your name isn't red that you're not feeling comfortable? Chen Guo looked at him disdainfully. For such an important day like challenging a dungeon record, Chen Guo felt that as the boss behind the scenes, she should personally give some advice. The several players at Thousand Waves Lake were used to suddenly hearing a woman's voice from Ye Xiu's character, and apparently, she was Ye Xiu's boss. Thousand Creations and Horse Shooter were terrified after hearing this. Ye Xiu's boss. What kind of background did she have? Hearing the voice today again, they know the boss was personally watching the battle, and she clearly considered this dungeon record as something very important. The 2 of them sat up straight, not daring to make any careless mistakes. Cough. Let's enter the dungeon, Ye Xiu said. Lord Grim entered the dungeon first, and the other 4 members followed afterwards. Challenging the dungeon record was something Tang Ru liked to do. Because it had been a while, she was in high spirits. But she also knew how important every detail was when challenging the dungeon record. This was something Ye Xiu had reminded her before. The 5 of them had run the dungeon together these past few days, so they were already very practiced with the strategy. If they had wanted to, the record could have been made a few days ago. It was just that in order to get the record under Guild Happy's name, they had delayed it. After all, it was just the 5 of them. If they had broken the record earlier, it was hard to say if they could do it again. This was something that even Ye Xiu couldn't say. Surpassing oneself wasn't easy to do. Ye Xiu was confident with this team beating the record. Although 1,000 Creations and Horse Shooter weren't as skilled as Steamed Bun Invasion's newbie playing was like a ticking time bomb. Setting a new record required precision. Ye Xiu would actually feel more worried bringing Steamed Bun Invasion. Even if Steamed Bun Invasion practiced well to the dungeon, Ye Xiu was afraid Steamed Bun Invasion would do some weird stuff. Ye Xiu felt more at ease with experienced players like 1,000 Creations and Horse Shooter. In accordance with their daily practice, this time, everyone went all out. Ye Xiu ran to the front. This was the position for the tank in a normal team. However, all his teammates knew that Ye Xiu wasn't a normal tank. A normal tank used skills to pull aggro and control the monsters. Then, the DPS classes in the team would have to be careful not to off-tank or attack the wrong monster. However, Ye Xiu's tank pulled aggro through pure damage, so his teammates didn't have to worry about going off-tank. It could be said Ye Xiu himself took most of the difficulty of the dungeon. His teammates had much less to worry about. With this strategy, 1,000 Creations and Horse Shooter would be embarrassed if they made any mistakes because the tasks they had to do were too simple. 2 battle mages and 2 launchers. They were both DPS classes. With Ye Xiu being the core and Sima Cheng as the support, they rolled through the dungeon at full speed. Although 1,000 Creations and Horse Shooter had cleared the dungeon with them many times, this was the first time they noticed how pro players really played. Amazing, the 2 of them praised. Of course they were talking to different people. 1,000 Creations was a Ye Xiu fan and Horse Shooter was a Sima Cheng fan. But this wouldn't change relationship between the 2 because everyone knew that Ye Xiu and Sima Cheng were very close. If their fans couldn't remain peaceful, wouldn't that be a slap to their idols' faces? 1,000 Creations and Horse Shooter fought in excitement, killing all the small monsters. In a blink of an eye, they reached the boss. They weren't worried at all. With godlike teammates, they couldn't feel the difficulty of the dungeon at all. All they had to do was look at their cooldowns and mana. Boss number 1 was killed quickly. Chen Guo looked at the time and was very excited. The only problem was that she couldn't find anyone to share the joy with. Ye Xiu and Tang Ru were both focusing on the dungeon, so she didn't want to disturb them. The dungeon progressed smoothly. The second boss was killed even faster. Chen Guo looked at the time and she couldn't help but run to get a drink to celebrate. The latter part of the 1,000 Waves Lake dungeon was in the water. This was another advantage for Ye Xiu. In PvE, the elites might not feel as awkward in the water, but they couldn't compare to Ye Xiu and Sima Cheng in this area. As for the others, they were already familiar with this part of the dungeon. Advance, advance, advance. Chen Guo wasn't looking at the fight anymore. She just stared at the time while drinking. This level 40 dungeon had 3 mini-bosses and 1 final boss. After the second boss, they slaughtered their way to the third one too. Although the strategy wasn't the same, the result was the same. There were no trip-ups and the third boss fell. The final part, everyone stay focused. This was the first time Ye Xiu spoke from the beginning to the final boss. The whole team worked together perfectly. There was no need to speak. Yes, sir. Everyone replied, keep up the good work. Everyone also heard the boss behind the scenes speak. Go. Ye Xiu only said a single word. As always, Sima Cheng's cleansing mist started the aggro and Ye Xiu's Lord Grim followed up. Gunfire, battle, spear. Because of the duplicate classes, the effects repeated a lot. In terms of visual effects, it didn't look as beautiful as when multiple classes burst forth. However, in terms of efficiency, they wouldn't lose out one bit. The final boss's health bar wasn't being slowly whittled down, but instead fell rapidly at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. Die, die, die. Chen Guo didn't dare to make a sound, holding her mobile with both hands, muttering silently in her mind. It's dead. Finally, she didn't need to control herself. She could shout out this sentence. The final boss in Thousand Wave Lake had fallen. A system announcement flew out. Congratulations to Guild Happy's players Lord Grim, Cleansing Mist, Chasing Haze, Thousand Creations, Horse Shooter for breaking the Thousand Wave Lake dungeon record time. 30:25:41. Having not seen this for a long time, Tang Ru smiled in satisfaction. Chen Guo looked a bit regretful. She saw Ye Xiu and Tang Yu look at her and said, "Guild Happy, it doesn't sound good. We should have called it Happy Valley or something." The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 398 Chapter 398. Too silent while everyone was happy that they broke the record. This boss behind the scenes suddenly talked trash about the guild name. This was something that even the experienced Ye Xiu hadn't expected. Chen Guo's sound had been directly relayed to everyone from Ye Xiu's mic. The whole team was in an awkward silence. After a moment of silence, the first to talk was the experienced Ye Xiu. He continued with the trash talk on the guild name. "Let it be right what it is right now. We can change it when we reach the heavenly domain. After all, that will be our main server." "That's reasonable." Chen Guo nodded her head and then spoke again as if she had thought of something. "Then should we create our guild on the other servers too?" Ye Xiu said with a handful of sweat. "It's still too early." "Okay," Chen Guo answered. She had finally stopped talking. However, the random trash talking had killed everyone's excitement. Continuing to be excited after all that felt a bit dumb. In the end, Ye Xiu faced the rest of the squad like a great general and said, "Let's keep dungeoning." Only a single run had been needed to beat the record. They still had 2 more chances to run the dungeon, so, of course, they would use them. It was a very logical choice. The other 4 members didn't have any objections. As a result, while their guild members were still celebrating the new record, the 5 main characters were already back to their usual leveling life. If truth, their excitement hadn't calmed down that quickly. It was just that they had been interrupted by a random thought and didn't know how to continue. For example, after beginning their second run, Thousand Creations and Horse Shooter couldn't help but open up the dungeon record rankings, admiring their own names in the Thousand Wave Lake dungeon record, as well as the time of 30:25:41, and giggle to themselves. Due to that, the 2 weren't focused enough and weren't able to keep up with the team, making mistakes here and there. Their second run clearly wasn't going to be good enough to beat the record. Thousand Creations and Horse Shooter immediately apologized. Ye Xiu told them not to worry. The current record was more than good enough. The time of 30:25:41 was already 4 minutes ahead of the second-place time. It could be said that this was mainly because of Ye Xiu and Su Macheng's strong control over the monsters. In addition, the synergy between the 2 was considered to be at the top, even on the professional stage. It was that same reason again. The harder the dungeon, the bigger the advantage Ye Xiu's team had because of their skill as pros. Ye Xiu was already very satisfied with the record, but he felt like the reactions from the top guilds were somewhat strange. It was too quiet. So quiet that it didn't fit the game. The moment that they had exited the dungeon, Ye Xiu had paid close attention to his surroundings but didn't notice any movements. Had the guilds really given up on competing with him? Ye Xiu couldn't believe it, but that's how it seemed to be. With Ye Xiu's experience, there had to be some scheme going on. The top guilds weren't making a move because they had a plan in mind that was waiting to be used. What could it be? Ye Xiu thought as he sent a message. The first person he would contact was, of course, Blue Brook Guild's 10th server guild leader, Blue River. "What do you think? Amazing, no?" Ye Xiu began the conversation like this. "What?" Blue River answered. "Record, did you not see it?" Ye Xiu replied. "Oh, I saw it, but that's expected." Blue River replied calmly. "Oh, so what are you guys planning to do?" Ye Xiu asked. Blue River understood what he meant, but saying it in such a straightforward manner left him speechless. He could only use as a reply. "Come back on Peerless Looks when you have time. A lot of our members miss you and they often ask where you are. See, if you had them that Blue River is your main account, they would message Blue River directly and that wouldn't be convenient. After all, you're a spy, no?" Ye Xiu said. Blue River was speechless again. This was really weird. The boss knows you're a spy yet still takes care of you. It was really weird. Blue River couldn't find any words to describe his feelings right now. "Then let it be. Everyone is going to be out of Thousand Waves Lake soon. Do you have something planned for the next leveling area? To be honest, I'm really looking forward to it." Ye Xiu added a hopeful emoji to his last sentence. Blue River's heart stopped beating for a second upon seeing this. They had tried countless number of plans, but Ye Xiu managed to outsmart them and take advantage of them every time. From this point of view, it was quite reasonable for Ye Xiu to look forward to their plan. "It looks like you're going to be disappointed this time," Blue River replied. This reply surprised Ye Xiu. Did it mean that this time the guilds won't be making any moves? Giving up Thousand Wave Lake made sense because the skill gap in a water battle was too large. They were truly helpless. But for levels 44-46, the map went back to the ground. There was no reason for them to be so obedient. Ye Xiu could not understand their plan at this moment. He could only go step by step. 2 days after breaking the record for the Thousand Waves Lake dungeon, everyone in the party reached level 44, which meant that they could begin setting the record for the next dungeon. The other guilds, elite members, had already left Thousand Waves Lake, but the war in Thousand Waves Lake left a side effect. The deaths had caused characters who were originally around the same experience level to have significant differences between them. The guilds used to level at the same speed, but it was all messed up now. However, even though there was an experience difference, they were still ahead of Ye Xiu. Their characters were all gathered together already. The new dungeon was their main task after midnight. This time, Ye Xiu obviously stopped selling his dungeon guides. With him participating, the guide wouldn't be a guarantee for breaking the record, so no one would buy it. The guide had become an exercise for concealed light to train his researching skill. "Everyone, be careful." Midnight was about to arrive. Ye Xiu and his team had already grouped up. He reminded them as they headed toward the leveling area and dungeon. Because of the difference in levels, the new leveling area was still controlled by the 99 characters. Here, Ye Xiu's team would not have an advantage in the water because there was no water. If they gathered their forces and attacked Ye Xiu's 5-player team, it would not be easy to deal with. Ye Xiu understood this, so starting from this level, he had to be more careful in every aspect. It turned out that level 44-46 level up area Gloom Forest was like its name, quiet and gloomy. Besides the monsters hiding in the forest, Ye Xiu didn't find any threat from other players. The more peaceful it was, the more focused Ye Xiu became. Chen Guo, who was beside him, saw his expression and asked curiously, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, but that's what's wrong," Ye Xiu replied. "Could they be scared?" Chen Guo said. "Even if they're scared because of the competition between clubs, they still have to think of a way and move forward. It's just like a pro match between a weak and a strong team. The weak team can't just surrender and not fight. They still have to think of a way to win, no?" Ye Xiu said, "But this isn't a pro match with rules, it's just a game," Chen Guo replied. "Game?" Ye Xiu mumbled the word while his character and his team arrived at Gloom Forest's dungeon entrance. "What should we do?" The other 4 were waiting for instructions from Ye Xiu. "Let go in then." Ye Xiu couldn't do anything. If nothing was happening, he could only follow the normal route. Level 4446 Gloom Forest Dungeon. Even if Ye Xiu wasn't selling walkthroughs anymore, he still had to break the record. Therefore, he needed to do research. It was the first time that the team was clearing the dungeon, so it wasn't that easy. From the beginning to the end, how to aggro, who to attack, etc., Ye Xiu explained every little detail. For the first time, no results came out. His team could not remember every single thing Ye Xiu said. They missed a few details here and there. 3 times a day was not enough practice. This was the same for the other guilds. Gloom Forest's dungeon record was still the system's for now. Tyrannical Ambition got the first clear record though. The next day was the same as the previous day. However, Ye Xiu's strategy was based on the synergy between Ye Xiu and Sima Cheng. Sima Cheng did not need Ye Xiu to remind her of anything a second time. The two didn't need any time to get used to the dungeon. With the two of them at the core, the tasks for the other 3 were very simple. As a result, Ye Xiu's team was able to get used to the dungeon very quickly, even when practicing the strategy. On their last run of the second day, they finally managed to get on TV, and the system announced that they had set a new record. The world was filled with admiration and astonishment towards Lord Grimm. There was no doubt that Lord Grimm was the #1 player in the 10th server. The guilds who fought for the records as if it were a life-or-death struggle were nowhere to be seen. On the 3rd day, they broke their own record. 3 runs, 2 new records. Guild Happy had the first 3 places on the dungeon record standings. On the 4th day, they set a new record another 2 times and occupied 5 places on the standings. The 5th day, the 6th day, Ye Xiu was intentionally breaking their record over and over again. On Gloom Forest's dungeon record standings, the same guild and the same characters dominated every spot from 1 to 10. It was incomparably beautiful. But the top guilds were still as quiet as before the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 399. Chapter 399. The coming of the Spring Festival fighting for the dungeon records was not as exciting as it had been without all the ruckus caused by the big guilds. It's just like a marathon is only exciting when the winner emerges from a large group of runners. If there is only one runner in the whole race, then the race would be very boring. There won't be any suspense to the results. This was the case with Guild Happy hogging Sin City's dungeon records. They had turned one of the most anticipated competition into a dull monologue. Conquering the top 10 positions on the standings awed the players of the 10th server time after time. The members of Guild Happy couldn't be more proud about this. However, this was getting rather tiresome for the 5 people who were creating the records and monopolizing the rankings. Horse Shooter and Thousand Creations were not exceptions to this. After making 10 records in a row, their initial excitement was already history. In the end, everyone was bored with making records. New record. Yep, new record. Even the exclamation mark was gone this time. What's next? Tang Ru asked Ye Xiu. It was clear that she hated the lack of challenges. It's good that there is no more troublemakers. Let's keep leveling up. Ye Xiu was more realistic. His doubts about the lack of response from the big guilds were nowhere to be seen. Therefore, everyone continued with dungeon crawling, monster killing, missions, and other necessary leveling up works. Due to the difference in levels, the team members stayed the same every day. A multiplayer online game now just feels like a singles-layer station game. It was getting a bit repetitive. However, Ye Xiu was still quite into it. In addition to leveling up his own character every day, he would also spend some time on guild matters. He also helped out 1 day, 2 days. Time passed like this day by day. Everyone continued to level and pro matches continued to be played. Ever since that day, Happy Internet Cafe maintained its tradition of broadcasting matches on match day. However, Excellent Era no longer became the sole match. Other exciting matches were chosen instead. Because of this, the cohesiveness of the guests declined greatly, and the match days lost much of its former excitement in the cafe. After all, in the past, the loyal spectators during match day were there because they supported the same team. They were all friendly with each other because they shared a common language. These spectators might not necessarily like that big projection screen, but they certainly loved cheering and cursing together as a crowd, encouraging their favorite team. Happy Internet Cafe's Match Day event had been so successful because of this type of atmosphere. But now, without the cohesiveness from supporting Team Excellent era and only that projection screen, the results were completely night and day. On these match days, when a hated enemy was seen, the Internet Cafe was able to gather quite a few spectators, but it was never as exciting as before. Many people felt that it was truly a pity. Some of them even tried to persuade Chen Guo to return to the original format, but Chen Guo always rejected them without hesitation. Happy Internet Cafe couldn't compare in popularity to before on match days, but the regular business wasn't affected. The flow of customers every day were as strong as ever. The peaceful days went by quickly. During the entire leveling process from levels 44-46 in Gloom Forest, Guild Happy didn't receive any challenges from the top guilds, and just like that, the dungeon records were conquered. In the blink of an eye, it was already near the end of the month, and it was time for the Spring Festival. Glory had released Spring Festival events a while ago. The Spring Festival events were the same every year with plenty of rewards. However, no matter how amazing the event was, it would be very difficult for it to upsurge the Internet Cafe's business. After all, the Spring Festival wasn't on the same level as Christmas in China. Even for the Pro Alliance, no matches were held during the Spring Festival. The usual frequent customers went back home during this time. Chen Guo was a generous boss and had let her employees go on vacation quite early. "What about you?" Chen Guo asked the employee that had been hired this year. "What about you?" the employee Ye Xiu asked back. "This is my home," Chen Guo said. "Let me stay here," Ye Xiu said decisively. "You're not going back home," Chen Guo frowned. Ye Xiu slowly shook his head. Chen Guo sighed but didn't say anything. Family matters were his business. Even though the two of them could be considered as friends, Chen Guo didn't understand his family situation too well, so she didn't feel qualified to say anything. "Not bad. I'll have someone to accompany me this year." Chen Guo welcomed Ye Xiu to stay. "What about little Tang?" Ye Xiu asked. "She's packing her things. She's going back home." Ye Xiu's question was a bit weird. Chen Guo nodded her head. "Where does she live?" It was the first time Ye Xiu had asked about Tang Ru's personal life. But Chen Guo unexpectedly shook her head. "I don't know." Chem, don't you think that little Tang's background is quite mysterious?" Ye Xiu asked. Chen Guo only laughed. "So what? It's not like she's a bad person." "That's true." Ye Xiu nodded his head. He turned around and continued to play the game. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve. There wasn't a single customer in the Internet Cafe. Only the sounds of Ye Xiu's mouse and keyboard could be heard. The other employees had been given their red envelopes already and had gone back home happily to celebrate the festival. Chen Guo walked around, bored. Soon afterwards, she saw Tang Ru carrying her luggage downstairs and hurriedly went over to help. However, Tang Ru shook her hand. "It's not heavy," and carried it down herself. "Everyone's gone." Tang Ru looked around the Internet Cafe and said after her gaze landed back onto Chen Guo, "I'm still here." A hand was raised behind a computer in the corner. The hand waved around, answering the question for Chen Guo. "You're not going back home," Tang Ru called out. "I don't have time. I have work to do," Ye Xiu replied. Tang Ru and Chen Guo couldn't help but laugh. They had a general understanding of Ye Xiu's situation, though, and knew that he was just joking. That obviously wasn't a reason to go back home. In reality, what family didn't have a computer in this day and age? The internet cafe provided a type of atmosphere. For a special time like the Spring Festival, everyone had their own important atmospheres to experience. Those who liked to frequent the internet cafe temporarily went back home to play. Don't forget to keep leveling when you go back. Don't be like steamed bun and lag behind after the event is done. Ye Xiu stopped doing his work and went over to sincerely warn the departing Tang Ru several times. Got it, Tang Ru chuckled. Come here, take the red envelope. Chen Guo handed over a big red envelope. Thanks, boss. Happy New Year. Tang Ru smiled splendidly and didn't decline it. What about me? Compared to not declining it, there was also taking the initiative to ask for it. What are you in a hurry for? Chen Guo rolled her eyes. I'm not even going back home. I should be getting money for working overtime. Ye Xiu asked. Little tank, let me help you call a taxi. Chen Guo ignored Ye Xiu. After months of working together, Chen Guo deeply respected Ye Xiu's skill, but she no longer adored or revered him anymore. Have a safe trip home. Ye Xiu waved his hands to send Tang Ru off. Happy New Year. Tang Ru waved her hands towards Ye Xiu and hopped into the taxi. Chen Guo and Ye Xiu sent her off until she could no longer be seen. How cold, let's go back. Ye Xiu rubbed his neck and called after Chen Guo. Chen Guo replied and the two went back to the internet cafe. You're going to leave it open. Ye Xiu pointed to the internet cafe's entrance. Chen Guo looked at it. It's not like it matters, just leave it open. There was even a tree for Christmas. You're not going to put anything up for the Spring Festival? Ye Xiu asked. Chen Guo stared blankly for a long while. That, I hadn't thought about it. You have no common sense. Ye Xiu said. I've always been by myself. I've been too lazy to do it. Chen Guo said. Oh, but not this year. The weather's nice today. Why not go out and buy some decorations? Ye Xiu said. The weather's not bad. Didn't you just say it was cold outside? Chen Guo asked. It's cold because I'm wearing too little. Ye Xiu rushed upstairs to wrap up a makeshift overcoat. Chen Guo stared dumbly at him for a long while. You don't have a second jacket, Chen Guo said. It's true, Ye Xiu said. Didn't you move over from across the street? How could you be so lazy? You didn't bring anything, Chen Guo said. You have to know that I wasn't prepared to retire and work at your internet cafe, Ye Xiu said. Then where's your stuff? Chen Guo asked. Probably at Suma Cheng's place, Ye Xiu asked. Ah, Chen Guo immediately grew excited. How about I come with you to get it? We can go 100 times. There's no rush. There's nothing to be in a rush for, Ye Xiu said. That's not important. Chen Guo clearly wasn't concerned with Ye Xiu's stuff. Chasing after a star, don't be in a hurry. She's also on break. I'll just have her come over sometime. Ye Xiu said. What day? What day? Chen Guo hastily asked. What day would you like? Every day. I'll go ask. Okay, let's go get the decorations first though. Chen Guo was excited. After cleaning things up for a bit, the two left the internet cafe. I say, your jacket can't be your only clothing you brought, right? Chen Guo began to wonder. What do you want to say? Ye Xiu glanced sideways. Have you washed and changed your clothing before? Since we don't have the same work and rest schedule, I'll forgive your poor observational skills, Ye Xiu said. But how come I've never seen you buy anything? Chen Guo questioned. Taobao, miss. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 400 Chapter 400. Ye Xiu. The New Year's Chen Guo wasn't any different than her usual unrestrained self. Traditional or modern, decoration or food, useful or not. As long as she liked something, she wouldn't haggle over the price and just hand over her money. Afterwards, she pointed towards Ye Xiu and gave her blessings with a big smile, saying Happy New Year's or May you be happy and prosperous. Then she stuffed her bags into Ye Xiu's hands. Chen Guo clasped her hands behind her back, walking forward high and mightily. Hearing Ye Xiu huffing and puffing behind her, she was certain that she had bought a good amount. This, and this one too. How are you selling these, sir? Chen Guo decided that she would buy a bit more. She arrived at yet another vendor's booth and without even looking clearly at what items were being sold, she pointed to a few that caught her eye and asked. While she asked, She turned her head around in delight to look behind her. But there was no one there. Ye Xiu, who had been behind her the entire time, had disappeared. When she had paid for the goods just before, Chen Guo still remembered that Ye Xiu was behind her. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve. There weren't many people who waited until this day to buy New Year goods, though there weren't too few people either. Chen Guo stood on her tiptoes to look around, but wasn't able to find any trace of Ye Xiu. She could only carry the goods she had just bought by herself and search by backtracking. But after just a few steps, she choked in anger. Ye Xiu had pushed the New Year goods that had just been bought to one side and was sitting on a folding stool, which came from who knew where, sitting and smoking leisurely. The purchased goods that had been pushed to one side looked kind of like he had set up a small vendor booth. Ye Xiu's eyes weren't bad. She quickly found Chen Guo and waved warmly at her. Chen Guo stomped her way over with a dark expression on her face, but she didn't know what to say. Seeing the pile on the ground, Chen Guo realized that she really had bought just a tad too much. Telling him that he couldn't take a rest was a bit mean. "Is that enough?" Ye Xiu said modestly. All of this was more than enough to last 5 spring festivals. Just for duelian alone, she would like this one and that one. In the end, she had bought a total of 7 duelian. Ye Xiu calculated. There was Happy Internet Cafe's main entrance, the restroom, the door leading to his, Chen Guo's, and Tang Ru's rooms, the 2 doors to the 2 bedrooms, his small storage room, plus the restroom. There were a total of 7 doors, so it was the perfect number. It was hard to say if Chen Guo had actually thought of this, though. "Is it too heavy?" Chen Guo asked. Obviously. Ye Xiu wasn't Tang Ru and conceded. He wasn't going to carry them all stubbornly. "Okay, let's go back then," Chen Guo said while picking up a few of the bags. Finally, Ye Xiu heaved a sigh of relief. He picked up the rest and went back home. By the time they got back to Happy Internet Cafe, the two were soaked with sweat despite the cold winter day. As soon as Chen Guo went through the entrance, she immediately found a nearby seat to sit down and pant. When she looked back, Ye Xiu had already thrown down his stuff, though the person himself wasn't anywhere to be found. Where'd he go? Chen Guo muttered, but then heard a sound from behind her. She looked back and saw that someone had walked into the internet cafe. The sunlight was blinding outside, so Chen Guo wasn't able to see the person clearly. She thought that it was a customer, so she immediately got up to welcome the person. When she got up and saw the person clearly, she blurted out, "What are you doing?" The person who had come in was Ye Xiu. He was dressed in formal attire. Draped across his arm was an overcoat. His elegant and stylish demeanor was bewildering. When the person heard Chen Guo speak, he was also startled, but he quickly regained his composure and gave a polite smile. "May I ask if Ye Xiu is here, or perhaps Ye Qiu?" Chen Guo was surprised. The moment she saw Ye Xiu looking like this, she had felt like she had made a mistake. As soon as this person spoke, Chen Guo realized that she really had made an error. This person, without a doubt, looked like the spitting image of Ye Xiu. His face might look alike, but more importantly, his hairstyle and build were a bit different. Ye Xiu quietly slipping away and switching attire to scare her was something she could believe, but switching his hair and his build in that short amount of time definitely wasn't possible. "You are?" Chen Guo already felt like there was no need to ask this question. The two looked practically the same. Who else could he be? "I'm his younger brother," the person introduced himself. "Twins?" Chen Guo asked. "Yes." "Could I ask who you are?" "Oh, I'm the boss here. Ye Xiu is here," Chen Guo said. "He was just here now." "Ye Xiu?" Chen Guo shouted. "Restroom," a similarly loud shout sounded back. "Oh, he's over there." Chen Guo pointed to where the restroom was. "I'll wait for him." The person nodded his head. "You can sit wherever you'd like." Chen Guo also nodded her head. The person walked around a few steps and then asked in a casual manner, "So he's using the name Ye Xiu here?" "Yeah." Chen Guo walked to the refrigerator, and after opening the door, she indicated for him to look. "What would you like to drink?" "Fanta, apple, thank you." Chen Guo grabbed a bottle of Fanta and threw it over. She also grabbed a bottle and asked, while twisting the cap, "What do you go by?" The person had jumped in fright at Chen Guo throwing the bottle over to him. With great difficulty, he was able to catch the bottle and regain his composure. When he heard Chen Guo's question, he immediately replied, "My name is Ye Xiu." "Ah," Chen Guo was startled, "You're Ye Xiu. I've always been." "Then he borrowed your name?" Chen Guo asked. "Yes, he even borrowed my credentials." Chen Guo was somewhat baffled. Their conversation stopped for a short moment when they heard the sound of rushing water from the restroom. Soon after, the sound of a door opening and closing could be heard. Ye Xiu walked over sloppily. Seeing Ye Xiu standing near the entrance, he immediately went, "Oh, he's looking for you," Chen Guo said, clearly. Ye Xiu nodded his head. With the two in front of her, Chen Guo could distinguish between the two. Indeed, from only their face, the two looked exactly the same. But apart from that, there wasn't anything else about them that was alike. One of them was wearing neat and tidy attire, while the other was wearing the same jacket he had been repeatedly wearing for the past 2 months. Because their work and rest schedule were different, Chen Guo didn't even know whether he had ever washed his jacket before. One of them had an immaculate appearance, while the other had only just gone out to buy some stuff and his face already looked dirty. Then she looked at their posture. One of them stood perfectly straight. Even the curve of his arm looked as if they had been paid particular attention to. As for the other, Chen Guo couldn't help but compare. The guy looked like he hadn't even worn his pants on properly. When he walked, his head was lowered and his posture was slouched. "What are you doing here?" Chen Guo saw Ye Xiu walk over unsteadily and greeted his completely different younger brother. "I'm here to pick you up to go back home and celebrate New Year's." "Who said I was going to go back?" Ye Xiu asked. "If you don't go back, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to work overtime," Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo immediately discovered another difference between the two: their tone of voice. Ye Xiu's tone of voice was bold and confident, as if everything he said was right. Even though Chen Guo had to admit that he was correct most of the time and everything should be like he said, but his tone of voice still made others want to punch him. In comparison, his younger brother had a very formal tone of voice. It was polite and proper. His tone of voice made it so it was impossible to tell if there was anything wrong. In any case, chatting with either of them wouldn't be too pleasant. Did she introduce herself? "This is my boss." Ye Xiu introduced Chen Guo to Ye Xiu. "She's the one who told me to work overtime." "Is that right?" Ye Xiu looked towards Chen Guo with uncertainty. "He asked for it. I approved." Chen Guo wouldn't be unjustly blamed like that. Ye Xiu's gaze immediately switched back to Ye Xiu. Ye Xiu exposed a helpless expression. "I won't go back. It'll be the same as always. Why ask why? It's different now. Didn't you retire this year? Then what are you doing drifting around outside?" Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo's heart thumped. She suddenly recalled the guess she had made with Tang Ru that night. Had Ye Xiu's retirement been caused by his family pressuring the club from behind the scenes? If not, why would his family immediately want him to come back after he retired? "Retiring doesn't mean anything. You outsiders wouldn't understand," Ye Xiu said. "Retiring? Even if you want to come back, it will still take a year, no?" Ye Xiu said. "Oh, you even know of this? It's not like you have anything to do this year. Why not come back home and take a rest?" Ye Xiu said. "I can rest anywhere, it's all the same." Ye Xiu said. "Father's health hasn't been too good recently. That's what you always say." "Fine, actually mother's." "You're lying. Little Dot died." "It's about time. He's already lived long enough," Ye Xiu said coldly. Chen Guo couldn't listen any longer, but she felt like she had to understand something. "Who's Little Dot?" "A dog," Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo suddenly realized the brother deserved to be the brother. Twins really were twins. These two people had some understand with each other on some areas. The specifics would need more observation. Chen Guo pondered. She retreated 2 steps and sat in the chair behind her. She took 2 sips and continued to watch the show. "Should I record it?" Chen Guo felt the phone in her pocket. She had even thought of doing this. You really should come back. Ye Xiu continued to urge him. Heh, Ye Xiu chuckled. If I go back, it'll make it easy for you to run away. Is that it? The very proper Ye Xiu had maintained his poise the entire time. This time it seemed like his heart had twisted. Chen Guo watched as he suddenly shot forward like an arrow towards Ye Xiu and grabbed Ye Xiu's clothing with his 2 hands. Chen Guo started. She stood up and then heard Ye Xiu say angrily, You shameful brother. That year, you stole the luggage that I had meticulously prepared. You went too far. It's more like I promptly discovered that my stupid little brother was about to run away from the family like an immature child, and decided to take his place to teach him a lesson by example. Ye Xiu answered the King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown.